Welcome back to Ranked! I'm McCurdy.
Imposter!
He's an imposter!
Charles.
I'm McCurdy.
I'm Nathan.
Imposter! You're not Nathan, you're Nanz.
He's an imposter!
Hey, on this channel, we stand by our Nanz.
Stand by your Nanz.
Last time we got a remake of a remake. When You Only Live Twice became The Spy Who Loved Me became Tomorrow Never Dies. And here we go again as Goldfinger became A View to a Kill became The World Is Not Enough. Another plot involving a powerful individual with a vast quantity of something valuable. And they want to blow up everyone else's supply of the valuable thing in order to make their valuable thing even more valuable.
Okay.
However, this time, instead of a fatso or a Nazi freak baby, we get a spoiled patricidal heiress who is also sexy as Elektra King, a real man-eater. This is it, everybody. This may be the ultimate James Bond villain. A woman, a delicious, harpy, succubus, foul temptress of a woman that no man, let alone international ladies man Bond James Bond, can resist. Good thing Bond has another sexy babe on his side to slap back. Oh, and there's also Christmas Jones, a nuclear physicist who ain't afraid to be sassy, but appears to be absolutely terrified of sports bras. There's also an ex-KGB terror anarchist somewhere in there, too. And something about his feelings. Oh, and some Wilsonian backstabbings and betrayals, of course. But Bond shoots everyone, saves Istanbul and all of Karen Bay's wives and sons, and bangs both Bond girls at least a couple times apiece, as evidenced by the classic final line of the film. I thought Christmas only came once a year, which is in fact number 69 on AFI's Top 100 Movie Quotes. Below, Here's Johnny from The Shining, but above, Please Sit on My Face from Grandma's Boy. Bond gets caught banging Roger Moore style, and everyone goes home happy, all except Valentine Dmitrovich Zukovsky, who receives final payment from Elektra in the form of a couple bullets. Bless your heart, sir. By rights, your final shot should have gone straight into Bond's kneecap.
Valentine Dmitrovich Zukovsky?
My knee aches every single day.
I gave him the limp.
Anyway, so this episode, we're trying to find a spot for The World Is Not Enough in the ranked list below, which goes thus.
Now.
GoldenEye, Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, License to Kill, The Spy Who Loved Me, The Man with the Golden Gun, Dr. No, A View to a Kill, For Your Eyes Only, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Thunderball, Tomorrow Never Dies, Octopussy, The Living Daylights, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, Diamonds Are Forever, You Only Live Twice. 18 damn movies in the list.
It's a lot of movies.
Yeah, this is a long series. Nobody told us it was this long.
No, they didn't. They didn't tell us. We hadn't been warned.
Should have looked it up before we started.
All right, McCurdy, what do you got?
So, a little behind the scenes of The World Is Not Enough. Shortly before Tomorrow Never Dies, the big dumb action movie was being released. Barbara Broccoli had seen a news report on Dateline about who would be controlling oil in the Caspian Sea in the wake of the fall of the Soviet Union. Again, this is interesting because, you know, we all know GoldenEye is 100% deals with the themes of, like, what happens after the Soviet Union had collapsed. Broccoli and our boy, who has a hard-on for convoluted plots, Michael G. Wilson, hired writing team Neil Purvis and Robert Wade. And no, it's not the same Wade that we talked about 2 episodes ago with GoldenEye. That for Jack Wade, that was Kevin Wade. So just to clarify, much like in the past where most of the Bond films would be written by either Richard Maybaum, Tom Mankiewicz, or our boy Mikey G. Whiz, Purvis and Wade. I just love the idea that he's Mikey G. Whiz. Okay. Purvis and Wade take over the writing duties to all the following Bond films after this. Every single one. Give or take, you know, there are rewrites and other directors or writers, including this one with Bruce Feinstein. Bruce Feinstein.
Pretty sure it's Fierstein.
Fierstein. Thank you.
Why am I correcting you? Every episode, I'm like, I don't correct you anymore, and I just keep doing it.
You should also get f***ed. So, Charlie, as I pour more wine, you like Lord of the Rings with all its preciousness, right?
I kind of do.
Precious.
Did you know that Peter Jackson was up for one of the as the director for this film?
Wow.
As one of the potential directors for this film was going to be Peter Jackson pre-Lord of the Rings. Unfortunately, Barbara saw his cult classic film, The Frighteners, starring Michael J. Fox. It's a movie I enjoy. It's kind of like a darker Ghostbusters.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a great movie. It's a fun movie. She passed on him. So she was like, let's go with somebody else. Because of that movie.
Wow.
Which sucks.
Well, like we always say, there's a silver lining to everything. What was happening in 98, 99? They were making Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So good job, Barbara. That might be the greatest thing you've ever contributed to my life.
Now, but part of that, though, is Jackson would later go on to say he probably would never direct a Bond film because they usually don't hire famous directors. And I'd say that's fairly accurate. Like, if you think of all the directors in all these films, with maybe exception of Sam Mendes, most of them aren't famous or really well-known directors. It's not like Spielberg or Nolan or anything like that.
That is interesting because Peter Jackson's a Kiwi, and so is Martin Campbell. So, you know, I wonder if there's some connection there or what. But I don't know how you watch Peter Jackson's pre-Lord of the Rings films and not want to immediately work with him, but, you know, whatever.
They ended up with director Michael Apted, mainly because most of his films had female leads that all went on to be nominated for Oscars, so it makes sense with the female villain that you would pick him. And before you ask, Spotswood from the previous film, he was just tired and he was like, I don't want to do it because that last movie was stressful enough, so I kind of want to break. So that's why he didn't return. We all should know by now, by going through all these films, that the title refers to Bond's family coat of arms from On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Arms of Sir Thomas Bond, Baronet of Peckham, died 1734. Argent on a chevron sable. 3 besants. Good motto, eh? The world is not enough.
The motto is something that had stuck with Fleming, and it was King Philip II, King of Spain. It was his motto. So the world is not enough. And that was kind of during the time when, you know, Spain and England, and they were going around the world and colonizing everything that they could. Everything that had legs and gold. Gold!
Speaking of which, didn't Bond have 3 bezants?
Bezants.
Please, what is bezant?
Gold balls.
Gold balls?
Yeah, he had the gold balls.
My hidden assets.
It's true!
Bezants? Bro, what the f*** is a bezant?
I don't know what to talk.
It's gold balls.
It's balls.
Hey, Goldfinger, you know, my family had gold balls. That's right.
So let's talk about the opening sequence real quick. This film marks, until this point in time, the longest opening sequence before the opening title credits clocks in about 15 minutes.
15 minutes!
It's 15 minutes long.
GoldenEye prologue is 10 minutes, 41 seconds. And that's right when the first note of the song kicks in. That's where I timed that out. Tomorrow Never Dies, 9 minutes, 48 seconds. This is
14 minutes and 15 seconds.
Originally, I know Charlie's probably going to pick up on this very quickly. Originally, the opening was supposed to just be the bank in Spain sequence, and then we'd cut to the opening credits. But they showed the film to a test audience, and because it's very kind of lackluster compared to the last 2 opening credits sequence we had, where, you know, we had Bond in this really cool dam sequence, and then we had all the explosions happen in the next Bond movie, it would have been kind of like, oh, that's not that exciting. He just kind of got away.
It would have been a smarter movie had it just been the bank sequence.
Yeah, but they decided to extend it to make it a part of the boat sequence, so it was a little more exciting, but it's still it's kind of a long sequence.
If it was up to me, what I would have done is, I think it would have been maybe 7.5 minutes long if the money had exploded, and then that triggered the title sequence. That would have been
cut
perfect.
right into the boats, like them chasing the boat.
Well, no. Bond has his victory, getting the money back, and then we cut to MI6. We do all the same stuff. King blows up, so you have, boom, you have a big tragedy, big tragic explosive moment that goes right into the title sequence.
The song.
Instead, it goes on twice as long. So at it would have been a 7.5 minute prologue that would have been really smart. Bond has a win, then a loss. Bond gets the money back, then MI6 is humiliated.
Yeah.
Do you jump into the chase scene right after the credits?
You don't need the chase scene. Why is that cigar chick there? Why is she there? She didn't trigger the bomb.
That's a good question, because she's just sitting there as if she knows someone's going to poke her head out of the hole.
I never thought about that at all.
If she triggered the bomb, but they say several times that it was his pin, his kingpin, a kingpin, I just put that together. His kingpin triggers the bomb.
The money was dipped in urea, in effect a highly compacted fertilizer bomb. Having handled the money, the water on 007's hands when he touched the ice started a chemical reaction. In one of the notes, the metal anti-counterfeiting strip had been replaced with magnesium, which acted as a detonator, and King's lapel pin was switched for a copy which contained a radio transmitter to trigger the blasts. In other words, he set off the bomb that killed him.
She didn't need to be there. She was there, what, to in case he survived the explosion? She was supposed to shoot him or something?
Yeah,
why is she there?
He runs out because he runs out to where the explosion is, and then she's just waiting there, and she's the same chick from before.
Would you like to check my figures?
Oh, I'm sure they're perfectly rounded.
In other words, he set off the bomb.
You're right, that doesn't make any sense.
But also, Bond walks up to the hole in the wall as if there should be somebody out there. And again, for all Bond knows, maybe there was a trigger man. But he's looking out the hole that was just created in the side of MI6, expecting to see somebody.
Yeah.
Why? Why is he expect? It should have just explosion, cut to title sequence, and then go right to the funeral.
That makes sense, yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
The only reason why it's there is so Bond can hurt his shoulder. But tell me why that's relevant to the rest of the plot.
Because it's not.
It isn't.
No,
it's
no,
not.
it is in that it is relevant to the plot in that once he gets to meet Renard.
But I knew you couldn't shoulder the responsibility.
And he's like, the only person who would have known that is you.
He and I had a little chat this morning. Knew all about us. Knew about my shoulder. Knew exactly where to hurt me.
Remember her response?
You had a sling on your arm at the funeral. And I didn't have to sleep with you to find that out.
Bond, to his credit, he still suspects her after that. But all the shoulder thing does is, in every action scene, he falls on it and he just goes, ah, that's it.
Yeah, you have to like pay attention to see it.
Poor shoulder.
There's never some kind of moment where it really comes into play. You could get rid of that whole thing and you wouldn't miss it.
Same as Renard's not feeling pain thing.
It's moving through the medulla oblongata, killing off his senses. Touch, smell, he feels no pain. He can push himself harder, longer than any normal man.
So the shoulder thing doesn't weigh in at all. And then they could have brought that to a head by, in the fight in the end. He's like choking Bond, and then maybe he just grabs the shoulder and Bond just immediately buckles, right? That would have brought some kind of conclusion to that whole sub-narrative of Bond having this injury. But instead, by the end of the movie, it's not even bugging Bond. He's climbing through this ship. He's having fight scenes.
He's swimming underwater.
Exactly.
Like twisting submarine door latches.
He's fully healed at that point.
If any more tendons snap, I'm afraid you're going to be out of action for weeks.
It's in every action scene, and then it's just gone. Which is like the most frustrating thing ever. Because it's so painfully, no pun intended, painfully obvious. Bond has a hurt shoulder. Renard can't feel pain. Renard is kicking him in the stomach rather than viciously punching him in the collarbone. And who knows, maybe their intention was that the kicking was affecting his shoulder. But remember, this is after we've been watching Bond do acrobatic through the sub for 20 minutes. It just needed to be more visually clear, and it wasn't. Like, come on. If Renard had defeated Bond by taking advantage of his shoulder injury, and then that's what got him trapped in that little thing, and then he had to resort to the gas thing.
You feel pain, I don't feel pain.
Because that's the whole thing, is his not feeling pain allows him to push himself harder and harder. You know how like Captain America is always like, I could do this all day. He could literally do it all day because you could just beat the crap out of him, and the only thing that would stop him is if his muscles stopped working. But he can just push through anything, and that doesn't really get its own conclusion either. I mean, if you just walked up to somebody on the street and showed them that fight scene, they would have no clue that Renard can't feel pain. It just doesn't weigh in at all. But as for the opening, all they had to do was show Bond get blown back and knocked into the wall. And if you really wanted to keep the shoulder thing. But I'm saying,
sure, I
could take or leave the shoulder thing if no, we have to have the shoulder thing. He was just in an explosion. Just have that be the opening, and you would cut it in half.
But Charlie, we wouldn't get to show off the cool boat. Okay?
You mean the Batmobile?
The Batmobile, we wouldn't get the Batboat, okay? The Bond boat.
Squirrely.
The Q-boat. It actually is called the Q-boat. And if you look in the movie, it even says, I think, Q-boat in the radar.
Well, Q said it's his fishing boat for when he retires.
Yeah,
fishing boat. Yes. How are you supposed to cast out of that?
Yeah,
thing?
that doesn't make any sense.
Something you destroyed, my fishing boat. For my retirement, away from you.
Maybe he's just throwing out torpedoes and all the fish just, float up from the concussion.
Makes sense. Also fun to mention that the little tie adjustment that Bond does when he's going under the water, that was actually Brosnan's idea. And if you look at it, they didn't need that. Like, you could have cut to him coming back up out of the water, but I think Brosnan was like, oh, it would be funny when he, goes underwater and he just
because remember he does it in Goldeneye?
This film ends Eon's 3-film deal with BMW. This film, we get to see the BMW Z8, which I think is definitely a step up from the previous 750, what was it, 750, whatever, which is teased to some pretty cool gadgets, but we barely see any of them. And the car is destroyed before it can do much other than fire a missile. This is because the director, Michael App, didn't want to try to top the car chase in the Rich Dad's car from the previous film. So we just get it more of as a little gag with the blade saw.
Q's not gonna like this.
What was he afraid? He's like, I can't top that.
Well, this movie was supposed to be a bit more grounded, right?
I think with this director, he just seemed more of an actor's director rather an action director, if that makes sense. So I think he was just
that shows this is not a big dumb action movie.
This is definitely more of a character movie.
All of the action is motivated in this movie as opposed to the last one. Except for the boat thing, which I still think should go. The rest of the action is motivated.
But the boat thing is the best action scene.
The boat thing is the best action scene.
Batmobile, bro!
I gotta get me one of those.
Robbie Coltrane.
Hagrid.
Robbie Coltrane of another fantasy series fame returns as former KGB agent Valentine Sokovsky. I said that right?
No. Try to say the full name. I just want to hear you try.
I don't have it written down.
Valentin Dmitrovich Sokovsky.
James Bond. I'm strangling the cat. Strangling a cat.
Stand by your Nanz. I believe this is one of the first times an informant from a previous film returns, save for maybe like Jack Wade or Felix Leiter. And also some of his dialogue is apparently was lifted from stuff that wasn't used in Goldeneye. But I do think it's really cool to have him back. Just to be like, oh yeah, we were dealing with Russia. We're kind of dealing with the same themes. So it's kind of nice to have like, oh, what was going on? Like, it would have been like if Renard Bane came back. And you were like, well, what's he doing these days? That kind of thing.
This movie takes place in his home city.
Yeah.
They could have brought him back.
Yeah.
If he hadn't have killed himself via shotgun to the chest. But anyway.
I want to say too soon, but I know it's not. It just feels that way. Okay.
Yeah. Well, they could have brought back his son.
Yeah, there could have been any number of sons.
All of my key employees are my sons. You must have quite an establishment here. Biggest family payroll in Turkey.
Before we had talked about them bringing back other characters and being like, oh, this was supposed to be, Agent X or whoever, and they couldn't do it for whatever reason. And so they created a new character in replacement of it. It's just nice that they finally were able to do it where they were like, oh, well, we're going to bring him back. And it worked out.
That is Irina, my mistress. Very talented girl.
In the last one, he was all pissed off and angry and threatening to kill Bond. And then they kind of make nice.
Yeah.
And in this one, he's just a joyful dude. Like, he's like, I made it. Before it was free market economy, it'll be the death of me. Now he's like,
Bond, James Bond.
Like, to the point where he's happy to see Bond. So maybe that seed money that he gave him in Goldeneye was enough to, turn his life around.
Now, let me get you straight, Jimmy. You shot him in the leg, you stole his car, you took his girl.
So why did you not kill me? Call it professional courtesy. And I should extend you the same courtesy. Kiros funeral parlor, 4 o'clock this afternoon. Your man will make a miraculous escape with the money. Your money.
I'm not sure I can really help you. I'm a legitimate businessman now.
I'm successful now and everything's great. Look at all these women running around and all that.
Would you care for some caviar? My own brand, Zukovsky's finest.
I just make caviar now.
Yeah, exactly.
And run a casino.
He probably has my favorite funny moment of the movie, which is...
Drink? Can't you just say hello like a normal person?
Like a normal person? Like Bond is just constantly Just pointing
Just brings
guns
a
at
gun
him
and be
and
like,
everybody else.
come on, let's go.
After you. No. After you. I insist. Lose the girls, Valentine. We need to talk.
Why am I suddenly worried that I'm not carrying enough insurance? Huh? Chill out, James.
Maybe chill out. Just chill out, bro.
He's so much fun in this movie.
Who are you? And how did you get in? I'll call security and congratulate them.
And congratulate them.
Congratulate them. Denise Richards. Oh my God, let's fucking talk about Denise Richards.
Let's talk about Miss Big Boobs.
Oh my God. Okay, so Denise Richards.
Give her a sports bra. Just please give her. She's gonna trip over her own titties. Just give her a sports bra.
Shut up. We'll talk about Denise more. I'm sure we will because I have a lot to say about Denise. It's not necessarily anyway. It's fun to note that her costume at the nuclear decommissioning site was inspired by Laura Croft, which in some ways is also influenced by Bond, which is kind of interesting.
And you can't call somebody Dr. Jones and not have it be a reference to Indiana.
And Denise is also, this is the best part, Denise is also the first Bond.
Hang on.
Uh-oh.
We just lost
We didn't
Nanz.
stand by our Nanz.
We lost our Nanz.
Maybe if we sing for him, he'll come back.
Stand by your Nanz. Oh, wait, we were off by a second.
One more time. 3,
right.
2, 1.
Stand by your Nanz.
Irina, take a hike.
I'm still rolling. Just waiting for Nanzo to come back.
Whatever the doctor orders.
Come on, buddy.
Hey! Hey! Denise is also the first Bond actress to receive a Razzie for Worst Actress for this role.
Did she receive it? Like, did she go get it?
No. The only person, there's only like 2 people who have ever received their award, and I know for a fact one of them is Halle Berry, which we'll talk about later in another future episode.
Oh, will?
Yes.
I don't know if it's that Denise is bad or if the writing is just terrible.
You know how to drive one of these things?
Doesn't exactly take a degree in nuclear physics.
Denise is bad.
Well, she's certainly not the worst actress of all time, and I do like her at parts in this movie.
Oh, too bad we don't have any champagne.
Or sour cream.
But if you watch her closely, a lot of times when the camera's on her and she doesn't have a line, she kind of looks like she's just drifted off entirely. I don't have a line, so I don't need to do anything here.
I think Christmas Jones should have been someone older
and less porn star hot.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Denise Richards looks like a porn star.
Denise Richards, I don't think was cast perfect. Just like the way that the script is, it seems like it's someone who's a little more like someone who's still beautiful, someone who's still like a beautiful woman, but just a little more crotchety and a little more like world weary and just like, yeah, I've heard the fucking jokes before, guys. Like I'm tired of this bullshit.
Miss
Dr. Jones. Christmas Jones. And don't make any jokes, I've heard them all.
I don't know any doctor jokes.
A little more grumpy, like could pull off grumpy, tired of men type woman. Denise Richards does not pull that off at all.
Yeah, not at all. And for some reason, right off the bat, she's just pissed off. And it's completely unprovoked. Bond hasn't even said a word to her. And she's like, look, motherfucker, this isn't happening, okay? So it just comes across as forced.
Are you here for a reason? Or are you just hoping for a glimmer? And you are?
Which I think really bogs the movie down because I feel like if you casted somebody else, the movie would have worked a lot better.
That's where the producers, though, go, no, we need a sexy 20-something. What do you mean we're going to have a 40-year-old Bond girl? No, we need to make money here.
How old was Maud Adams in 98, 99? They should have dusted her off for round 3.
Okay, imagine someone like Nicole Kidman. I don't know how old I feel like Nicole Kidman at that age may have worked.
Sure.
Someone like her, that same role probably would have worked for me better. A little more, felt like a little more maturity. You know?
Somebody who is the opposite of Elektra. Because Denise Richards could have just been Elektra. She could have been this young hottie who's just a spoiled heiress.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to somebody a little older, a little more mature, somebody where they don't immediately hypnotize Bond with their floppy titties and their cute face.
I love what you're saying.
You know?
I love the idea of like not Denise Richards, but like a Denise Richards type playing the Elektra role, and then somebody who probably the same actress playing Elektra, playing the role of Christmas Jones.
Wait a minute.
It's bad. It's just really bad.
Well, and every line has to do with nuclear physics and...
I'm a nuclear physicist.
There's that moment where Bond says something like...
There's one critical element here I may have overlooked.
And her response is, what, more plutonium?
What, more plutonium?
And that's such a non sequitur. That doesn't make sense. Like, she has a one-track mind, which is like, nuclear physics, nuclear physics, nuclear physics.
Plutonium, 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 plutonium. More plutonium?
No, not everything goes back to plutonium and nukes and all. Like, no, and that's, but all that was a setup for
beluga, caviar,
which was supposed to sound cool and all that, but her response made it dumb.
Okay, so now let's shift hardcore gears to some more, like, I guess heartbreaking news, like not as fun. Let's all simmer down. Let's all take a drink. Just like, let's chill, man.
Maybe chill out. Just chill out, bro. We don't want to save this for the end?
We're going to save this for the end. I'm going to talk about it more.
This man is worth a double toast.
Throughout.
Okay. Yeah. But it's...
Don't even drink. Just pour your whole drink out. Right onto your computer.
On my floor.
So this film introduces...
I live in a piece of shit. Here, wait. On camera.
You could do that.
Wait.
Well, he's also like pissing on the floor too, so... What's beer?
This is for our boy Q. wait. I gotta make sure.
All right, there we go. I can't do that in my house. This film introduces John Cleese of Monty Python fame.
What makes you think she's a witch? Well, she turned me into a newt. A newt. I got better.
Well, and don't forget, he was in Harry Potter with Mr. Zukovsky.
How can you be nearly headless?
Like this.
As R, which I can only presume means replacement.
If you're Q, does that make him R?
But is also the next letter of the alphabet, so that's fun.
And you might be... This is 007. Ah, yes, the legendary 007 wit. Or at least half of it.
Llewelyn actually had asked the producers if Q could get an assistant for some time. So there were previous movies. They're like, I want to, you know, Desmond's like, wouldn't it be great if I had an assistant that we had like back and forth with? Like,
that's what Denise Richards should have been doing.
Exactly.
A sexy ass assistant that Bond's always hitting on, and she's not like Moneypenny. Like Moneypenny's like, I want an engagement ring. I love you. And then you have Denise Richards, who's like super fine, and she's like, get out of here, Bond. No, never gonna happen.
She could have been the doctor that gave him a clean bill of health.
Exactly.
Exactly. To McCurdy's point, the doctor should have been the nuclear physicist, and Denise Richards should have been the doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Smart. Anyway, on all that note, this film marks Desmond Llewellyn's last film in the franchise before he tragically passes away, which we'll talk about. No, why do you always do this?
More.
That was a lot.
That's a lot. I'm wasting way too much.
Oh my God.
Q.
We're going to talk about, we'll talk about more about Desmond Llewellyn towards the end, because this whole episode is dedicated to Desmond Llewellyn.
Yes. Anyway, speaking of Q, let's talk gadgets. You got your snow jacket, you got the car with missiles and all that, and the remote start. You got your Batman boat, credit card key thing, watch, flashlight and grappling gun, flashbang gun and glasses, and then X-ray glasses. Notice I didn't say polarized glasses. Glasses that actually do something cool. Which, by the way, remember in Tomorrow Never Dies' title sequence, they had the X-ray? It's almost like that was a carryover. Like maybe Bond was supposed to have X-ray glasses in Tomorrow Never Dies, And then they already put it in the title sequence, and then they removed it from the film or something. But
yeah, I read that the way that they shot that is they shot everybody as is, and then they did a blue screen and just matched the two together with the
wow.
Because I do see that scene, and I think like that's actually really impressive for 1999. It's like how they pulled that off.
Do you guys remember where Valentine's cane gun comes from? Remember this?
It's in the books, right?
Remember in Casino Royale where he's having his showdown with Lashif, and a Lashif guy comes up behind him with a cane gun.
My cane is in your bag, but it is a gun, not a cane, and can blow the space of your spine without a sound.
And he says, if you don't lose this match, I'm going to put a hole in you.
Ah.
It took this long to get the cane gun going. It's a fantastic death on Valentine's part.
Nanz, what did you think of The World Is Not Enough?
I didn't love it.
Okay.
Whoa. That's...
So what's your... Okay, keep it tight. Keep it right next to Tomorrow Never Dies. How do you stack it up against Tomorrow Never Dies?
Lower.
Really? This is one of those movies where I do want to run through the whole plot because it's something of an Octopussy situation.
Yes.
Did you guys catch on to the Goldfinger A View to a Kill?
I did.
Thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I was going to bring it up.
I'll admit that never crossed my mind until, watching it now. And it's by no means a remake. It's just the central idea of blowing up the supply of something. Gold? No. Black gold. And that's kind of the purpose of the character Bullion. His whole thing is he's obsessed with gold. He's a straight-up Goldfinger reference.
What have you been, you gold-encrusted buffoon?
Who then gets a Truman Lodge-style death.
Boss. Another $80 million write-off.
So glad to see you. I guess it's time to start
Me too.
But it's just a business thing, right? Like, take as much control as you can.
It's still a nuclear weapon blowing up something then
even more
makes you
directly related.
Yeah, something that then gives you supremacy in a certain market.
Gold, oil, microchips.
You throw in the drama with the King family, and it becomes a completely different film.
You make it a chick instead of a dude.
Yeah, nobody was trying to bang Goldfinger. Everybody trying to bang Elektra King.
I could definitely use what you were saying you were going to do, like a run through of the plot. But I mean, I like Elektra King and I like the plot and all that. It kind of went back to older Bond in a bad way for me, where it was a bit goofy and the action was not great. The Parahawks or whatever, the snowmobiles on the parachutes. I don't know if that was supposed to be exciting or tense or anything. It was just kind of slow and boring. The submarine fight scene was not interesting.
Yeah.
Like you just keep seeing Renard like putting the plutonium rod in, and it comes out and he puts it back in, and it comes out and he puts it back in, and it comes out and he puts it back in. It's just like a confined wet space that they're not able to really fight all that well in. As we already kind of touched on, you don't see them take advantage of Bond being injured at all, and he might as well not have been injured. Renard doesn't feel pain. They even say he gets stronger day by day, which I don't understand that. But okay, not feeling pain, sure. They don't take advantage of it, minus he plays hot potato with a guy as punishment,
those
I
two
suppose.
elements. Those two elements were begging to collide. Bond being injured and Renard. All they mean is that he can push himself really hard. And if you can push yourself really hard, you'll gain strength. But unfortunately, they don't even do anything with that because he doesn't look like Bane. He just looks like some scrawny Englishman. But what they're getting at is that he'll grow stronger until he dies, inevitably.
You can't kill me. I'm already dead.
So getting to the plot itself, Elektra gets kidnapped, right, by Renard. So she gets Stockholm Syndrome, right?
It's called Stockholm Syndrome. Common in kidnappings. Young, impressionable victim. Sheltered. Sexually inexperienced. A powerful kidnapper. Skilled in torture, manipulation. Something snaps in the victim's mind. Captive falls in love with her captor.
But then she kind of takes over. It seems like she's the lead bad guy, not really Renard.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's fully fleshed out.
I think it is.
I'm not sure what Renard gets out of this situation. Like, he's killing himself for what?
What I'm curious about is this, because I said last episode that I think I agree with
our audience that Tomorrow Never Dies is a middle movie, but middle low. I think this movie is middle movie, but middle high. As much as I still think like the boat scene could be lost and it would make it a smarter movie. I think it is a smarter movie. I think it is a more purposeful movie than Tomorrow Never Dies' big dumb action movie stuff. As entertaining as that movie is, it's always going to be a big dumb action movie. This has some elements to that, but that action is motivated and purposeful. And I'm curious that if I run through the plot, if you'll keep where you have it or if you'll raise it.
Yeah, so I mean, you're saying the action is purposeful and motivated. Obviously, that's great, but if it's boring action, then who cares? Like, what's the point of the Parahawk thing? How's that motivated?
Yeah, I'll say this. Like, I feel like a lot of times when we argue these movies, sometimes I do feel like you might say, oh, well, this is all motivated. Like, the boxes are checked off. But I do think that, like, yeah, the boxes were checked off, but I didn't feel satisfied with the box being checked. I don't have the better way to say that. And I feel like that's kind of my problem with this. Like, that's one of the problems I have with this movie, because there's some stuff that I think is really good. But I do think that, like, the direction, the action sequences, Denise Richards, really kind of weigh the movie down for me a lot. I would watch Tomorrow Never Dies and be really like, okay with it. I'm like, I like this movie. This is fun. This movie, I feel bored by it. And a lot of the reasons why Nanz says, like, a lot of the action sequences just don't really like, are just like, I'm like, why am I watching this? Like, I'm not excited about it. And that's what, and like, I get why you're like, well, the plot, the story is so good because she has Stockholm syndrome and you think she's the good guy and then it turns out she's the bad guy and all that stuff. And I'm like, that's great. And that stuff is good. Don't get me wrong. I do think the acting, particularly from her and from Renard, is good. But I do think there's other stuff that I'm like, for one, I'll talk about it later, but there's the huge plot hole that I've had to study like it's a book report, because it drives me nuts every time I watch this movie.
I'd love to hear that, but finish your point.
But two, it's just there was a lot of stuff that I'm just like, yeah, the submarine stuff just doesn't really sell the movie for me. And I feel like this movie there's some plotty things that I just like don't like.
For me, there's nothing in this movie that is so bad. Nothing in it is making me roll my eyes or like exhale sharply or anything. Not even Christmas Jones. As much as she is the weakest part of the movie, she doesn't make me hate the movie. I don't hate her or anything like that.
Like you said about Michael Apt, the director, that maybe he's more of,
an actor's director, and I think he is
more in the acting. Let me preface with I've said this a million times before. The older I get, the more my brain turns off when action scenes begin, and I start thinking about what I want to eat for lunch or whatever.
Sure. And
as a kid, you're waiting for the action scenes, and then as an adult, those are the boring parts, because the more interesting stuff is the Elektra King stuff. Again, you think she has Stockholm syndrome, but then it turns out that Renard has like a reverse Stockholm syndrome, which is interesting. And his motivation flips entirely from being this anarchist.
The anarchist.
His only goal is chaos.
Anti-capitalist.
What do you believe in? Preservation of capital?
To literally the opposite. He reverses to the point where he helps this woman he falls in love with to turn into the ultimate capitalist.
The future is yours. Have fun with it.
Yeah. So I find those things interesting. And then what I mean by motivated action is that there have been times in the past where entire action scenes are like again, Tomorrow Never Dies. They have that whole motorcycle chase that doesn't make sense because she could have taken the handcuffs off at any time.
Sure.
It kind of unmotivates this action.
Or any other time that we've had an action scene just for the sake of action.
Regardless of how the action is executed, and you guys saying it's boring is totally legit, if that's the way you feel. I'm saying that it's at least motivated so far as the story is concerned. And where it's motivated specifically with, you guys mentioned the Parahawk scene being boring. Whether I read it as boring or not, the action is motivated so far as that whole thing is to legitimize her as being this victim of a terrorist. And it checks out with the plot versus having an entire bike chase that we could have done without. They could have just escaped Carver's pad and just gone right into Llewelyn's safe house. That's what I'm talking about.
If we talk about the plot, we talk about my little issue with the movie. Like it's
Sure.
always
Yeah,
bothered me.
When we hit the plot hole, let me know.
Okay.
When we hit your plot hole.
Tell us when we're hitting your hole right in the right spot.
Oh yeah, just do it.
But this is, real quick preface, this is something of a return to GoldenEye, where like Tanner's back, Valentine's back.
Yes.
Let me out!
But it's also a return to general Bondness. I know I said last time that Tomorrow Never Dies was return to the Roger Moore era. This is
This
maybe
one
even
feels
more
like
so.
a Roger Moore movie more.
Totally.
Like I totally
Yeah.
agree with what Nanz said, because every time I watch this movie, once I get to the point where we get to the caviar factory or farm or whatever they want to call it, I'm like, this movie is a Roger Moore movie. Like that's when I get to that. When I get to that point in the movie, I'm like, this is a Roger Moore movie. This isn't a Brosnan movie.
You got Bond getting caught banging at the end.
007. 007.
If they would have chopped off that boat scene, you would have had a classier movie, but it goes full Roger Moore where it's like popcorn scene.
You're not thinking that.
I sure am, boy. Never heard of Evel Knievel?
We have a lot of silly lines from actors and scenes.
Yeah, plenty
and
of quips and jokes.
I came prepared for a cold reception. It was strictly platonic. You seem to have had a small reversal of fortune.
I have to get it back, or somebody's gonna have my ass.
First things first.
Real quick, let me just throw out the Bond jokes. I picked up on 2.
He was buried with work.
After Davidoff dies. And then the other one, it's not funny, but it's clever.
You wouldn't kill me. You'd miss me.
And then Bond shoots her point blank.
I never miss.
And you don't laugh, but I count that as a Bond joke.
I would also count that. I'd count it as well. I think it's not so much it has to be funny, but it also has to be, it's like the clever, and that is very clever, and it fits really well with the scene and the rhythm of everything that's going on. So I would totally count that.
And then return to Bond walks into the office. Moneypenny's sitting at the desk, framed right. They flirt, and she wants an engagement ring.
And then he shows her a dildo. I mean, a cigar.
I know exactly where to put that.
Close, but no cigar.
Bond goes through M's office and is briefed. You have straightforward ordering vodka martinis.
Vodka martini. Shaken, not stirred.
Bond says James Bond twice. But what's kind of funny is that the first one's classy, like Elektra.
Mister?
Bond. James Bond.
And the second one is just kind of flashy and over the top, like Christmas Jones.
So you're a British spy. Do you have a name?
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Just like GoldenEye, there are 2 Bond girls where one's a really hot nerd.
You're such a geek.
But she's, again, this is like porn star level hot nerd to where it's unbelievable. And then the other one is this terrible seductress man-eater.
Xenia, I can't breathe. One last
who likes torture, and literally Natalia and Xenia return in this.
Well, we had talked about before, like even when we were during the Roger Moore era, when they were still like, we've kind of figured out the formula of these movies that the producers were like, okay, in most of these movies, we're going to have 3 girls possibly. And this movie has 3 girls. You've got one that's the main good girl. You've got one that's the bad girl that's probably going to get it at the end of the movie. And then you got one girl that's probably going to die or is just like there.
We also have M. They kind of plug M in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting to see. So I don't understand why M is so dumb in this movie. I understand she has a personal relationship with King, but why is she going in the field?
There's also kind of this weird ethical thing with M where it's like, is she abusing MI6
for her friends?
For the gain of her friends?
Definitely.
Old friend.
We read law at Oxford together.
Like, why are they involved in this rich family's business affairs? Like,
yeah, but the other hand, it's like it's an attack on CIA, or not, sorry, MI6. There's an actual attack on MI6, so it's like you're investigating the thing that happened.
But also, King, he's like a Hugo Drax, right? He's like a British
he's an
citizen.
industrialist. He's an entrepreneur or whatever.
The government has his back because he's going to usher in a ton of oil.
He's going for the oil.
Of course. The one pipeline the West is counting on to supply our reserves for the next century.
That's true.
It is corrupt that M is doing this. It's like a personal favor to a friend, but it's also going to help the country. It's in the country's best interests.
Yeah.
It's no different from, Tomorrow Never Dies, where they're planning fake news in the BBC that's going to help the country. I mean, Bond even says at one point, remember, he's still got the hat. M says at one point, don't make this personal. And Bond says, I'm not. Are you? And she's like, clear the room. Anyway, so the plot goes thus.
Now.
Go.
So, Renard.
Victor Zokas, a.k.a.
Renard.
He's an ex-KGB dude.
And then after Afghanistan, the KGB decided Renard was a liability and just cut him loose.
Elektra King is kidnapped by Renard. King goes to M saying, hey, help me. I don't know what to do. My daughter's kidnapped.
Her father tried to deal with it on his own, with no success. So he came to me.
M tells him, don't pay the ransom. Don't give in to terrorist demands. She sends 009 in to kill Renard and presumably save the girl. She doesn't exactly say that. She just says,
after Robert came to me, I sent 009 to kill Renard. Before he completed the mission, Elektra escaped.
Before he can do that, Elektra escapes. Big quotes, finger quotes. She escapes.
I seduced the guards, used my body, and the rest I got a gun and started shooting.
009 shoots Renard in the head. That's why he's got the thing moving through his medulla oblongata. Sometime later, King is building his pipeline and it's attacked. And you can assume that this was probably Renard. So knowing what happens in the movie, at this point, Renard and Elektra King are in cahoots.
Oh, sorry. You say sometime later. How much later?
Unclear.
Okay, because at points in the movie, it seems like it just happened. Like, whoa, was this like a month ago? And she's like killing her dad? Like
remember when Bond's looking through the research? There's some People magazine-esque thing about Elektra King, and I think it says she's 21.
You should have had her before, when she was innocent.
And then her dossier says that she's currently 28.
I could see it being a couple years, like 2 or 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why I say sometime, who knows? But now they're in cahoots. Now that we know what happens in the movie, they're in cahoots. The pipeline gets attacked. You can assume that it's Renard stirring up trouble with her father. An MI6 operative has in his possession a report from the Russians, from the Atomic Energy Division. We don't know how he got it, but it doesn't matter. He had this report.
The reports Robert bought were stolen from an MI6 agent who was killed for it.
That operative is killed, and this report is stolen from him. King buys that report for $5 million, aka
whoever how much
pounds.
The pounds was.
Yeah.
What would King want this for?
He was led to believe the document was a secret report, identifying the terrorists who'd attacked a new oil pipeline he's building in the region.
Remember, this is the same amount of money as the ransom. So he was willing to buy this report that would help him in his business, but not buy back his daughter for the same amount of money. There was a reason why that was the same amount. 2 different instances of $5 million.
You're saying that this is supposed to show that, like, my dad would buy this report versus save my life.
Yeah. She's very bitter that he didn't pay the ransom.
Your people will leave you here to rot. Just like you left me. You and my father.
Your father
My father was nothing.
Got it. Okay,
So,
keep going.
That money from the purchase of the stolen report ends up in the hands of the Swiss banker from the opening. And it's kind of suspect how. Obviously, though, in the grand scheme of things, it was purposely sent back as a secret explosive. They want Bond to take the money back to King.
Doesn't Bond get kind of held up, like held at gunpoint at the Swiss banker?
They're basically like, you should get out of here.
I am offering you the opportunity to walk out with the money, Mr. Bond.
I'm giving you the opportunity to walk out with your life.
They want him to have the money. They wanted King to get the money so that he could get blowed up. They're trying to get him out of there, and Bond's saying, I am not leaving until you tell me who killed the MI6 operative who had the stolen report.
The Swiss bank know.
I am merely the middleman. I'm just trying to do the honorable thing, returning the money to its rightful owner.
I didn't come for the money.
Essentially, Bond knows that the Swiss banker isn't doing this out of the goodness of his heart. And so he's trying to follow the money back to where the banker got the money in the first place because he knows that source is the same person who killed the MI6 operative.
Give me the name.
All right. But you'll have to protect me.
Obviously, at the beginning of the movie, we have no clue who that might be. After having seen the movie, we know that it's Renard, but not just Renard, it's Renard with Elektra. The question isn't how did the banker come by the money, because we know Renard gave him the money to give to Bond to give to King.
I've retrieved the money.
The man who retrieved my money.
The question is why nobody questioned how they got the money back so easily. But when you're staring at $5 million, it's pretty easy to just accept it for what it is. They had no clue it was gonna blow up in their face, literally. But god damn it, that's the whole point of Elektra's scheme, is that she's trying to point out that her father values money more than her. And she took advantage of that to poetically murder him with the same amount of money that he refused to pay to save her. Don't you see? Don't you fucking see?
When I realized my father wouldn't rescue me from the kidnappers, I knew I had to form another alliance.
So real quickly, let me just lay it out simply. Her motivation is revenge against Daddy and MI6, specifically M. Three-step plan goes thus.
Now.
Step 1. Have my new terrorist boyfriend attack Daddy's precious pipeline. Step 2. Sell him a report allegedly disclosing the identity of the attackers of Daddy's precious pipeline. Step 3. Return the money used to buy the report as a secret bomb to assassinate Daddy and that fucking bitch who still wants his man meat.
I always knew he'd conquer the pussy.
We as an audience come into the movie at step 3. Steps 1 and 2 occur before the movie even starts, and we only get bits and pieces that we have to put together. Again, that's why I like this movie, because it's not super straightforward, but it does make sense. Nanz has a report for me, and I buy that report. And then you, McCurdy, say, hey, that money you gave Nanz, I retrieved it, and I'm going to give it back to you. And I'm like, well, but I bought the thing from him. And
that
you're
makes
like,
no sense.
Kim,
that makes no sense.
I'm going to give you the money. So that's what I mean. It makes no sense. It should be highly suspect.
So good of you to come see me, Mr. Bond, particularly on such short notice.
But this isn't a plot hole, because end of the day, the Swiss guy contacts King, says, hey, I have your money. King's like, how'd you get the money? He's like, I got it. Bond shows up. There's the money. There it is. Nobody questions it because it was such a well-disguised bomb. They didn't know it was a bomb. The only thing I can kind of legitimize it with, we're never told, but we can assume that maybe the report was bogus. All that M says
something
is,
like that. That could make sense.
M says
he was led to believe the document was a secret report.
He was led to believe that this report was this thing that could lead him to the identities of the people sabotaging his pipeline.
Got it. Okay.
Either way, behind the scenes, Elektra knew he would buy the report.
He's a man of great integrity.
We'll buy stolen reports for £3 million.
So she orchestrated the whole plan of having him buy the report, whether the report is legit or illegitimate. It's almost as if he bought the report, and then he's like, wait a second, this report is bogus. So he calls up M, and he's like, hey, can you do me another favor? And M's like, yeah, remember that time in college when we hooked up? And he's like, yeah, anyway, help me get my money back. And then the Swiss banker's like, I got it back for you. So King should have been going, how'd we get that back so easily? And MI6 should have been going, how'd we get that back so easily? And it's Bond who says,
it doesn't exactly explain why someone would want me out of their office alive.
That's part of my classic keeping Bond alive trope. Renard says,
I did spare your life at the banker's office. But that's right. I couldn't kill you. You were working for me. You delivered the money, killed King.
It makes sense once you know that Renard and Elektra are behind it, right? So it makes sense after you've seen the whole movie, but you do kind of have to go back and watch that. Because in the beginning, it's like, wait, how did you get the money? And who gave it to you? And what? How did you get the money? That's why they were, quote, humiliated, because they didn't think twice about it. They just were excited to help out this King guy, because clearly M has a boner for him, like an old flame for him.
Yeah.
And then he gets blowed up.
You get blowed up.
I was very upset when the money didn't kill both of you.
That was their grand scheme, was to get revenge on King and M at the same time for not paying the $5 million, which again is why it was literally $5 million that killed King. The same $5 million that should have saved her life is what ended King's life. So all in all, a pretty goddamn convoluted scheme just to kill her father, but throw Renard into the mix, and it makes sense because it's more than killing King.
Your present, courtesy of the late Mr. Bond.
My executioner.
Overpraise, I'm afraid.
It's about humiliating M and MI6.
Mikey G. Wiz is just so
he's
hard
salivating
on right now. He's salivating. He's like, this is
over
great. I love it.
Oh, it makes
I love it.
It makes sense. I love it. Keep going, fellas.
Keep going. Oh,
it's like mystery box.
Yeah.
You know, nobody knows what's happening, so therefore we're gonna trick them into thinking it's good.
So that's the end of phase 1. Phase 2, take over the world.
The world will never be the same.
So then at that point, because King dies, Elektra takes over the pipeline construction. Bond puts together the whole, it's a message, your terrorist is back, because he's like, oh, the ransom amount and the returned money is the same amount. So Renard.
Robert is dead. MI6 is humiliated. He's had his revenge.
Not quite. Renard had 3 enemies in that kidnapping. And there's still one he hasn't touched. Elektra.
He goes and hangs out with Elektra. That's when Renard sends the Parahawks. And at first glance, that might not make sense because...
Are they just there to make it look like she's getting attacked? Are they actually trying to kill Bond?
Because she says...
M told me she was sending someone.
That somebody turns out to be Bond. Again, this isn't explained, but you can assume that the whole idea was to have the person that MI6 sends to either get killed by the Parahawks or at least witness this attack on Elektra to make it seem more legitimate that she is in trouble.
I forgot to mention something. And I feel like this is a perfect time to mention it when Neil Previs and Robert Wade were pitching their story idea for the film, and they specifically pitched the idea of Elektra King or having like a female villain. But the thing that they had said was Bond thinks he finds his Tracy, but really actually finds his Blofeld. And that was such a awesome. A touching like quote.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because what do they have in common? What does she do that Blofeld also did?
The earlobes?
Take more than cutting off your earlobes, Blofeld, to turn you into a count.
I may yet surprise you.
She cuts her earlobe off, yeah.
Yeah, but I thought of that as, because you don't notice it right away.
She's always got like that big earring thing.
She has that earring thing that covers
it.
It is in the sequence when he's watching the tapes of her debriefing videos. It is in that sequence. But it is kind of a subtle hint to the audience that, as we know as fans of Bond films, Bond villains tend to have some deformity of some kind, generally speaking. And it's just like such a subtle thing that you don't see because her hair's covering her ear most of the time. And then when you reveal it, it's like, wait, she has a deformity. Her earlobe's messed up. It's kind of a subtle cue to say she is a bad guy, which I think that kind of thing's brilliant.
What you're saying is that Bond should have known, but Bond was his dick was too hard to think twice. All the blood was not in his brain, it was in his cock because he was looking at this really hot chick the whole time. She's like, and Bond's like, I'll save you, princess. Look in my eyes. Look in my eyes. And she's like,
Elektra, look at me! Elektra, look at me! Look at me! Elektra, look at me! Look at me! Look at my eyes! Look at my eyes! Look at my eyes! You're all right. Everything's all right. Trust me.
Elektra! She's great. She's great. She's selling him all the time. But that may be the most real moment that they share. They make a very subtle reference to Tracy Bond.
Have you ever lost a loved one, Mr. Bond?
And then the next sequence is them skiing together, just like in OHMSS.
Yeah.
It's like they're happy, and it's like, yay, it's the same sequence. So it is a brilliant turn of he thinks he's found the perfect woman, and then whoosh, snatched away from him again.
If you're on the know and you've seen all the movies and you know that he gets married and all this stuff, she asks those questions about, like, have you ever lost somebody or something like that. He doesn't answer the question. He just skims over it because it's too painful for him to answer.
It's the only time they refer to Tracy in the Brosnan films, right?
Yeah, but it's in such a way that if you're in the know of the films, then you would get it. But if you don't know all the other movies, it was just kind of like fly by. I think that's a cool reference.
So continuing, they do the whole casino thing.
There's no point in living if you can't feel alive.
And then that's when we cut to our scene with the rocks at Devil's Breath. We have our little reveal of Renard. And I think it's a really cool scene because obviously he can't feel the rocks.
To test their devotion to God by holding the scalding rocks in their hands.
It's a really good way of introducing him. His speech about, testing someone's devotion, and then he kills Dr. Arkov because Arkov's the one that's like, we should just cancel everything right now.
We should scrap the rest of the mission.
He failed his test of devotion.
Because as Renard shows later on, you have to be willing to die to join whatever cause he's on, even if Renard himself kills you, which he does all the time.
I think he kills more of his own men than Bond. And I find that hilarious because he's a guy who has a death sentence. He knows he's going to die soon. So I think he's just like, you, like he's just shooting his own guys all the time, almost out just because he's just bitter that he has a death sentence.
The bullet will kill him, but he'll grow stronger every day until the day he dies.
But also at the end of the movie, all the guys on the sub know they're going to die.
So if you're going to hang out with Renard, you have to be completely devoted.
Mikhail Arkhov, Russian Atomic Energy Department.
Arkhov is from the Russian Atomic Energy Department, which is where the stolen report came from.
Is this the stolen report?
Yes, classified from the Russian Atomic Energy Department.
So that's an important little connection there. Maybe he even wrote the report, you know, and that's what I mean. Maybe it was like a fraudulent report, and Renard is a Russian ex-KGB, so it kind of makes sense that these things are connected. So Arkhov is the guy who sent out the Parahawks.
Atomic Energy Anti-Terrorist Unit. Where did you find this?
I took it off a Parahawk, which tried to kill Elektra King this morning.
The Parahawks were meant to be returned.
So Arkhov is this important guy, and then they pull that classic trope. McCurdy, what's that classic trope?
So you think that the way that the villain is talking, that he's going to kill the guy that he's specifically talking to, and that's something we saw all the way back in From Russia with Love.
Oh my God, they're going to kill
and
Davidoff.
Then
Davidoff
they kill the other guy. The other guy
killed
gets
Arkhov.
killed.
Oh, shocker.
But I love that they bring that back because like it's like you kind of forgot about that trope completely.
And then Bond immediately kills that guy. So it doesn't matter.
You can take his place. Take his ID.
So Dr. Arkhov, he's the guy who initially sets up the plan to go steal the nuke. He's killed and replaced by Davidoff, who is immediately killed and replaced by Bond. So Bond is pretending to be Dr. Arkhov.
Yep.
They go to this decommissioned nuclear testing site in Kazakhstan.
Welcome to Kazakhstan, Dr. Arkhov.
#1 decommissioned site in Kazakhstan. To steal a bomb.
Expecting Davidoff? He caught a bullet instead of the plane.
There's no point living if you can't feel alive.
Huh?
This isn't sufficiently damning. She could have heard those words when she was kidnapped. It's like, you know, Bond is onto her at that point, but it's not enough.
That's why the shoulder thing is important, Charlie.
Neither of those are damning enough. All that matters is that Bond is suspect, but like neither of those are enough evidence. It's enough to make Bond go, huh. So then...
No hard feelings, Mr. Bond. But we're even. Soon, you'll feel nothing at all.
Renard puts a bomb at the bottom of the elevator because he wants to blow up the building he's in for no reason.
At it? Like,
well, he's pointing at it because he wants Bond to look at it, but like... What if James Bond had never showed up and he just did that whole stealing scheme with Arkhov? Did he want to leave peacefully, or did he want to blow up everybody that was down there and then run away with the bomb? He is an anarchist, so maybe he wanted to just blow that up and then get to the surface and shoot everybody and drive off. But the smarter thing would have been to not have a bomb at the bottom of the elevator and just exit.
My men will hear the shot and kill you.
And the firefight will bring down half the army from above.
It's just so much more of a liability considering the fact that the place is surrounded by an army. So maybe it was a backup plan, but when did they attach the elevator to the bomb? That detail makes it seem like the plan was always to use the bomb no matter what happened. In short, is this another one of those things that doesn't make sense in hindsight? Or was the plan all along to have a bomb blow up the place? But whatever.
My point is, what if James Bond had never been there? Would he still have put a bomb under the elevator so that he could
conveniently blow up somebody foiling his plan?
He's an anarchist. It could be either way.
I remember, it doesn't matter if Bond was there or the other guy was there. Denise Richards is going to come out and say, he's an imposter.
He's an imposter. Dr. Arkhov is 63 years old.
This is your imposter.
Every warhead has a locator card. We can track the signal.
You mean one of these?
So Elektra calls up M and asks her to come to Kazakhstan. I'm assuming Kazakhstan because of what Bond says later.
What are you doing here in Kazakhstan?
But wait, That's not right. The King pipeline doesn't go through Kazakhstan. It originates in Azerbaijan and moves west. So what the hell was Bond talking about? After hanging out with Elektra and now Christmas Jones, James Bond has zero blood in his brain. It's all in his dick, and he can't even fucking remember what fucking country he's in.
Somebody's gonna have my ass.
First things first.
No, do it now so you get your fucking brain back. Elektra King asks M to...
I'll send someone out.
Could you come?
And she's in Baku.
Elektra King is calling from Baku.
I also feel obligated to point out that there's a portrait of Bernard Lee when Elektra's speaking on the video screens.
Bond's missing, and I want you to come here. I need your help. And she feels this obligation. She feels obligated because she's like a mom. Daughter. Yeah. Again, Elektra Complex. She's got a little Elektra Complex. It should have been the other way. She should have killed M in the opening and then wanted to bang her dad. That's what an Elektra Complex would have been. Why? Her name's Elektra for a reason.
Oh, wait! She did bang her dad!
Okay, I didn't do this research. Explain to me Elektra, because all I know of Elektra is comic books. It's the female version of an Oedipus complex.
Okay.
And the whole Oedipus complex thing is, it's like a Freudian thing.
Sigmund Freud.
Oedipus Rex is a classic mythological character who basically killed his dad and f***ed his mom without knowing it was his dad and not knowing it was his mom.
Yes.
But then Freud took that on. He took that mythological story
Analyze this.
and attributed it to this weird psychological thing where boys, essentially his whole theory is that all men want to kill their dad and f*** their mom.
Got it.
And it's like, you know, most people are like, what? No, I love my parents, but it's deeper than that. It's like you want to replace your dad, just like a prince wants to replace the king. And if you're replacing the king, you also get the king's pussy. Go research that on your own.
There's a lot more to that.
Exactly. I'm really cutting corners here, but the point is that the Elektra Complex is the female version of that, where you want to kill your mom and f*** your dad.
In this instance, it's an heiress literally supplanting a man named King. So ironically, from a Freudian standpoint, Elektra has an Oedipus complex, where she has this hatred of her father and this fixation with her mother.
He often spoke of how compassionately you advised him on the best course of action during my kidnapping. It's very valuable, you know. I just couldn't let it explode with the rest of him.
Slap her right in the fucking face.
A lot of people getting slapped.
A lot of slapping. She really has it in for her dad, and maybe he was a secret asshole because he was willing to destroy that ancient church rather than just build a pipeline around it. So maybe he was a butthead.
100 years ago, my mother's family discovered the oil here.
She has this fixation with her mom. Something about how he stole...
His kingdom he stole from my mother.
I think, though, she probably should have adopted her mother's maiden name. You know, because she's all about her mom's side of the family. You know, like that would have helped if she would have rejected the name of King. She's like, I'm queen now.
Queen of Hearts.
Anyway, meanwhile, Bond confronts Elektra.
James?
Surprised?
Bond's in Kazakhstan, and this is where
you need a map for this movie.
Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Turkey.
Yeah, Caspian Sea is right in the middle. You have Kazakhstan over here. Everything I just explained about the bomb takes place in Kazakhstan, but Elektra lives in Azerbaijan, specifically Baku. So suddenly we're back in Baku. So he goes from Kazakhstan back to Baku. It feels like a Dark Knight Rises type situation where it's like, this feels weird. That the character fast traveled really quickly for the story to work. The scene with him coming to Elektra feels like they added that later because they needed that scene.
Yes, and he's like, well, you're working with Renard. And she's like, are you saying Renard's the one coming to kill me? And I said, drop the act. And I do love that moment. She nails him to the wall with her.
How dare you, that animal, that monster?
Bond's like, he used your exact words. I don't. God, you're hot. Oh my God, you're so hot. But you must be corrupt. You're so hot, though. Like, Bond's part of the genius of Elektra is that it's literally taking advantage of Bond's #1 weakness, as Alex Trevelyan put it.
Where is she?
Ah, yes. A fatal weakness.
Yeah, it's like when a bad guy uses a woman to take advantage of Bond, but in this case, the bad person is a woman.
Yeah, so, like, that's all great.
In the same way that M's judgment is clouded because of her supposed friendship with King, Bond is blind to Elektra's evil. You know, again, the blood is not in Bond's brain in that moment. It's in his dick, and he's like, he can't even think. He's like, oh my, I'm so horny. Anyway, so then, so that's in that moment, though, that's the third time that we hear the phrase used as bait.
You used the girl as bait.
You used me as bait.
The worm on the hook again.
She doesn't need to know it's the same man that may be after her. Don't frighten her.
And M is completely justified in saying that. But I think this is just like a cheap screenwriting trick to convince the audience in a few words that Elektra was somehow wronged, but I don't think she really was. Hey, these terrorists want this money, and M says, don't pay them. I'll send a 00 in there.
Against every instinct in my heart, every emotion as a mother, I told him not to pay the ransom. I thought we had time on our side.
And Bond's like, so you used her as bait. And I'm like, wait, how are you using her as bait if she's already kidnapped? How is that using her as bait? You're trying to rescue her. And that's where it's kind of loosey-goosey with the whole, like, being bitter about not paying the ransom, because there are a million examples of paying a ransom and then they just kill the kidnapped victim anyway.
Well, maybe, and I think in that situation, the bait would have been like, oh, we're using her as bait to make her think like, oh, we're going to bring you the money. Oh, we're not bringing the money. It's 009, and he shoots you in the head. Like, that's maybe what they were referring to.
But is that bait, or is that just being smart? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that, the whole bait thing, especially in the scene with M, the bait thing seems like a non sequitur, because she's like, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and I told him not to pay the money, and then Bond just says, you used her as bait, and she's like, well, I guess. I mean, I was trying to save her life, but also kill the guys who kidnapped her. Like, that might be the only thing that, for me, is a little confused. There should have been a higher sin of M's. And considering the way that M and King interact, it was begging to be something like they had an affair, which would also kind of tie into the Elektra Complex. But, you know, before I get too carried away with that, there should have been something that M really feels bad about, but not paying the ransom and sending in a 00 is probably the best thing she could have done in the interest of Elektra. But at the same time, from Elektra's perspective, she's rotting away in a cell, and she is a spoiled brat. And she's like, what? Dad can't spend $5 million on me? Like, I just spent like 300 grand on a fucking purse. Like, he can't spend that's where it's like, okay, maybe she's just a spoiled brat. Within all these vagaries, it still checks out and still tracks for me. Anyway, so there's another attack on the pipeline. M shows up at her pipeline control facility thing. Bond still doesn't believe Elektra. That's when he warns M, and he gives her the tracking GPS card from the bomb.
Suppose the inside man, the one who switched King's lapel pin, turned out to be an inside woman.
Then, for no reason, Christmas Jones shows up.
Okay, so, this is the part of the movie. This is the part that, like, is the poison pill for me for the movie. Because we meet Christmas Jones in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan. It's all the way over here. Caspian Sea. Other country I can't pronounce.
Azerbaijan.
Denise Richards, her job is to decommission all these nuclear weapons.
Post-Cold War.
Post-Cold War. Nuclear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's her job, right?
Yeah.
What the F is she doing at an oil facility in Azerbaijan? This part doesn't make any goddamn sense. And it's literally, to me, when I watch the movie, it reads as either A, the director being like, f it, this is my justification, or B, it's the writers being like, f it, this is my justification. Is we need her tits in the movie because we need to put butts in seats. And people need to see porn star Denise Richards in this movie. She's not a porn star, just to verify. But she needs to be in the movie from previous movies. It's like, why are this character still here? Oh, because Bond is like being chased, whatever. I have her with me. That makes sense. Okay, we're going on to the next thing.
Yeah, running around in swimsuits.
We're running around. Things are happening. I need you. It doesn't matter what your occupation is. Sometimes it does matter because they actually do have stakes in the plot. She has no stakes in the plot. And for some reason, she's there. I don't know why she's there.
Yeah, the only motivation we get is that she doesn't want to get in trouble with her boss.
I have to get it back, or somebody's gonna have my ass.
Even though she's just a scientist working on the decommissioning site, she acts like they're just gonna pin the whole thing on her.
But it's like, well, we need her for the scene so she can defuse the bomb.
Yeah.
We need her for that scene because she's one of the stars of the movie. We need her for the scene, so she's in the scene of the movie. We go back to we do that cool little CGI oil pipeline chase thing.
Let it flow!
But I can stop
it! Let it flow!
No, just let the bomb go. And she's like, why'd they let the bomb go? It's just like, let the bomb go, because Bond already is suspicious about everything else. He's like, he thinks, oh, we'll kill ourselves. No one was going to know, and then we can come back. Element of surprise. Great.
Yeah.
After that scene, it's the aftermath of it, they're walking through it, and he literally asked her, what are you doing here?
What's your story? What are you doing here in Kazakhstan?
Avoiding those kind of questions, just like you.
I came here so I didn't have to answer questions like that. And I was just like, when she says that, that's when she says that, I'm like,
because the writers didn't know
they're
why
just like,
this
I don't
porn
know.
star looking chick
Why is she here? I don't know.
Working on bombs.
We don't know. The thing that answers my question that isn't in the movie, that for some reason Michael Apt was like, it doesn't belong in the movie. We don't need it in the movie.
It just seemed really not to add up to very much. Truly, it didn't help the story.
And I'm like, yes, you did need it in the movie, you stupid idiot. You just needed a scene that's this is literally the scene. Bond comes to M as she's walking into the oil facility, and it's Denise Richards talking to a dude and being like, blah, 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 nuclear physicist, plutonium. In the background, but you don't hear her say that. She probably says that in her because she's stupid.
Wait, are you saying this is an actual deleted scene?
There's a scientist here from the International Decommissioning Agency, Dr. Jones. She's checking to see if she can find anything.
Just to basically say why she is here. That's literally all the scene is there for. So she's there to try to find the bomb, which doesn't quite make sense still, because I'm like, well, why would the bomb be specifically at the oil facility unless they were, I mean, I guess it's like, oh, they're afraid that they're going to use it to blow up the oil fields.
What's your plan for the bomb?
To be threatened by a man who can't grasp what he's involved in.
Well, remember, Bond just started to suspect Elektra, and he doesn't really know for sure that she's anybody other than who she says she is.
Who's trying to kill me?
I told you I don't know. There's no point in living if you can't feel alive. Isn't that right, Elektra? Isn't that your motto? Or did you steal it from your old friend, Renard?
Are you saying Renard is the man who's trying to kill me?
Drop the act.
And then Elektra gets the phone call saying that the pipeline's been attacked.
He struck again. 10 men are dead at the pipeline.
So they're basically just putting two and two together. Renard's going to use the bomb against the pipeline somehow. Because remember, as far as anybody knows, as far as anybody's concerned, Renard has always been against the pipeline. Whether he's doing it because he's a butthead or because he's been hired by the Russians or something.
The Russians have 3 competing pipelines, and they'll do anything to stop me.
Now he works freelance.
But for whom?
There are 4 competing pipelines. I'm willing to bet half the customers in this casino would be very happy to see the King pipeline disappear.
My fix would be this. Get rid of the scene where he confronts Elektra.
Sure.
Because that's not necessary.
No.
Right?
Yeah,
and
nothing
also
happens from that.
And
No.
yeah, all they needed was that at the conclusion of the nuclear site scene, they just needed something along the lines of Christmas Jones saying, well, I'm going to stay with you until we find this.
You're going to need my help because I'm so smart.
I'm going to stick with you until we find this bomb because, you know, and then at that point, that's a little heroic on her part. She feels responsible for all of these bombs she works on.
Yeah.
As much as you could help her character, that could have helped, where that would at least motivate her being with Bond for the rest of the film.
It's my job for these bombs to not explode and then mess up the world.
And we just needed that
cares. Because she cares. Now, on top of that, instead of going back to Baku and confronting Elektra, right after Christmas Jones says that, they just cut to the scene where Elektra says, "Hey, M, can you come here?" But then cut to Bond showing up at that pipeline control facility. And that's when he just talks to M. You don't even have to change the dialogue. He just says, what if it wasn't an inside man? What if it was an inside woman? And she's like...
She kills her father and attacks her own pipeline?
They share a common motto and the f***ed up shoulder thing. Those would have been enough for M to say, well, that's not a lot to go on. And Bond's like, I have a feeling, though, that I can't shake.
It was instinct.
And then that would be the perfect opportunity to pay off that moment where M says in the beginning...
Shadows stay in front or behind. never on top.
Don't bang her, so M's suddenly fixated on that. 007, I told you not to f her. And Bond's like, forget about that. Don't you understand what I'm saying? This bitch is cray. All of that, it would have legitimized Christmas Jones being there, and it would not have changed anything with Elektra's story.
I think that the director was thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to focus on the characters and dealing with that stuff, not so much the semantics of like characters being where. But see, as a audience member, those are the things you got to watch out for, because that's what makes Nanz feel like, why am I watching this movie and this is boring, because I'm confused and I don't have a lot of clarity. And like, as much as I want to say some of the clarity of you explaining the plot actually helps this movie and compared to something like Octopussy, where I was like
confused.
Like it helps, but it also, it's like, it doesn't sway me enough to be like, yeah, this movie's so much better, but keep going.
So continuing, Renard then puts the bomb that he stole in the pipeline, but it's only half of the bomb.
Look, half the plutonium's missing.
So what are you saying? It couldn't go nuclear?
The explosion covers up the theft of the plutonium. They make it look like a terrorist attack.
Everybody's like, oh, the bomb's gone. Great. End of story there.
I want to question the idea of half plutonium not creating a whole nuclear explosion. Like, I'm not a nuclear physicist. I don't understand how atomic bombs work necessarily, but it would come to reason that plutonium is radioactive, and whatever you do to explode an atomic bomb, so it really makes sense that it feels like such a writer's thing to say. It's like, oh, it's only half the plutonium. So it wasn't actually like a nuclear explosion.
Any nuclear physicists watching
please
this,
explain.
Please comment, or anybody out there in general. If you have access to Wikipedia, leave a comment right now. If you have half of the plutonium of a given nuke and you just put a match to it, does it blow up like Hiroshima?
Sure the answer is no. So the nuclear bombs, they're actually nuclear devices. It's not like TNT that just explodes and you have less or more TNT and bigger or smaller explosion. There's like a specific set of chain reactions that have to happen to set off a nuclear bomb.
If you explode that plutonium, even if it's half the amount of plutonium, weapons grade plutonium, wouldn't that create a nuclear radiation of some kind, and like the explosion still would have hurt Bond in them? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm not saying you get the same size explosion regardless of how much plutonium you have.
If they had just said, oh, the plutonium's not here, but the explosive device or whatever, like if they said the detonator is in here instead and explodes, like I would have been like, okay, I buy that. But like the fact that they had to use this whole half.
That's strange. It doesn't read like a nuclear explosion.
Robinson's reporting. The bomb was a dud.
Regardless of the math or the amounts checking out in reality or whatever, the whole point is that they needed some plutonium to be in the pipeline explosion.
So there's enough to spread around to cover up for the part that they did take.
But what are they going to do with the other half?
Renard takes the other half of the stolen plutonium and puts it on the nuclear sub, captained by the nephew of Valentine.
What class is your nephew running?
Victor 3, you call it.
Nuclear. He's not loading cargo. They want the sub. They want to use the reactor.
That's it. Put weapons-grade plutonium in that sub's reactor. Instant, catastrophic meltdown.
The explosion would destroy Istanbul.
The whole point is that half of it was going to blow up the pipeline.
Yes.
And that would really make Elektra out to be a victim. She would be devoid of all accusations.
Story-wise, you're making sense.
She's a victim.
Why would she blow up her own pipeline?
It makes her look innocent.
And then on the other side is that Istanbul would be destroyed, and that would benefit her. So at the same time, she's a victim, and she wins the lottery.
There'd be only one way to get the oil out.
Yeah, down south to the Med, the King pipeline.
And then you got the piece with Valentine, because the whole movie you're like, why is Valentine in the movie?
He goes to him in the first place because he's ex-KGB and he wants to ask him about Renard.
Sure. But with the casino piece, Elektra comes. We have that weird scene where she's like, you have $1 million
Christmas
credits.
Christmas comes.
No. I'm talking about the casino scene.
More than once a year.
I was gonna say.
Why am I on this show? I'm talking about the casino scene where Elektra comes in.
There's only a few episodes left to get through.
There is. Okay, so Elektra comes in.
One card, hydro, $1 million.
So there's this weird cards thing where it's like, even when I watched the movie, I was like, why aren't they playing Baccarat or Blackjack? Like, why aren't they just playing Blackjack?
High card
just
for $1 million.
high card. It's like, what? It's such a performance that they're doing this, they're putting this whole thing on for Bond.
She drops $1 million in your casino and you don't even blink an eye. What's she paying you off for?
My nephew is in the Navy. He's smuggling some machinery for her.
And then Valentine and her just kind of play it off like, oh, this is normal.
Bond comes back to that. Bond's like, I should have known better the moment that was happening. But again, what was happening in that scene? Did you see her low-cut dress? Bond's blood is not in his brain. It's in his dick.
That's fair.
And Bond's like, she can do no wrong. And I'm not trying to give the movie a pass. It's like Star Wars, where it's like, I don't know, Palpatine clouded everybody's minds, and that justifies every plot hole. No, in this, her sexy ass self is making everybody dumb.
All this because you fell for Renard.
I've always had a power over men.
But again, we have another one of my favorite tropes, which is that Bond's nemesis is his equal but opposite. No woman can resist Bond. No man can resist Elektra. Even Renard.
You turned Renard.
She essentially turns Renard the same way that Bond turned Pussy Galore.
I must have appealed to maternal instincts.
Used my body.
She'd be the greatest secret agent ever.
You understand? Nobody can resist me.
That's where it's revealed that it's, Elektra is the ultimate bad guy, not Renard. He was kind of a red herring.
You killed your father.
He killed me. He killed me the day he refused to pay my ransom.
Was this all about the oil?
It is my oil. Mine. And my family's.
Your father's legacy.
My family's legacy.
So then if they blow up Istanbul, she'll have oil dominance. Again, what other movies does that sound like? A View to a Kill and Goldfinger? Yeah. So that's the plot. And honestly, it all tracks. They take everything I just read and they kind of wrap it up a little bit, but when you unravel it, the whole plot makes sense. There's nothing that I found in my studying of this plot that negates the entire film.
Yeah, all that said and good, but kind of what I said earlier, just because you check a box, just because it makes sense, for me, it's not so much about the plot making sense. The script is good as far as the checks all the boxes. It's the way the story is told. When you have a director who's like really focused on things like characters, which he does a really good job of. Like I have to applaud him on things like all of the scenes with Renard and Elektra and all that stuff. He does a really great job at those things. Denise, not so much. It's the contrast between the things that are like really good in the movie with the really things that are really bad in the movie. And Christmas Jones is really bad and Elektra is really good. Let me put it this way. Sometimes it's not about what you tell, it's how you tell that story. Yeah. And I feel like in the how is where the movie loses itself. And it kind of like loses the audience a little bit.
And that's fine. That's
Denise
fine,
Richards'
but my point,
boobs.
my point is that there's a difference between License to Kill and Octopussy. Octopussy, when you scrutinize it, none of the plot is necessary when your main bad guy, whose only goal is to make money, suddenly has the ability to print an unlimited amount of money.
Sure.
That makes that movie meh. Whereas License to Kill has its own level of things being somewhat unclear and confusing.
Yeah.
But it's the case of, but you don't need to know that. And GoldenEye too. GoldenEye has some questions, but those questions don't ruin the movie. They don't negate the movie.
I agree that the plot makes sense. There is some stuff that I feel like you've said, Lucy.
It makes sense.
It overall makes sense.
And I do like the idea.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. The idea with Elektra King, Renard, that whole plot, fine. I don't have an issue with that. It does not bother me. I just find that the movie sometimes feels very slow paced because they're dragged down by this very Mikey G. Whiz plot. It's a thing now. Sorry, it happens. Yeah. Mikey G. Whiz, it's like a very Mikey G. Whiz plot, but better because it makes sense, like you're suggesting. But I do feel like the movie overall just gets really dragged down by it in a way that And it really does not help. Like I know in the past we talked about like that doesn't poison pill the movie. That doesn't poison pill the movie. I really do feel like Denise Richards' performance and her character and the fact that she got cast in this movie really poison pills the movie. As much as I think as Sophie Macau, I think is how you pronounce her name.
She's French, so I always assumed it was like Marceau
or something like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Her performance, fantastic. Really great.
She does great. I think Pierce does a really good job too.
Bond and bad guy is always going to be what I fixate on because those are the important elements, and the Bond chicks are just literal cherries on top. She's my cherry pie.
But in this movie in particular, I feel like it's somebody who painted this beautiful painting and then said, "Hey, Denise, can you finish this?" And she put her boobs in some paint and it was like, okay, woo! And that's what I feel about this.
That's a great way to put it. And then the action scenes is someone just dipping their fingers in the paint and just
going,
yeah. Her titties, though, like the whole time, I'm worried for her physical safety. Like she's gonna trip on her own boobs, and run into the wall or something. The male equivalent would be if James Bond was running around with a boner. You'd be like, is anybody else distracted by James Bond's hard-on right in your
constantly
face?
Shuffling with his waistline of his pants just gets him killed.
Why does Bond have a boner? And she's running around and she's just like, it's so distracting.
Listen, it's not even the fact that she's hot because, like, as we know, like a lot of Bond girls are these gorgeous women. It's not really that. As much as her performance in this film is so bad in so many parts of the movie, and I think it progressively gets worse.
But again, is it her or is it the bad writing for her?
I think it's her. I think it's her.
It's kind of hard to parse, though.
It is,
but it's her.
But I think it's her. I think a good actress can take crappy lines and make them work.
Sure.
She does an okay job when she's first introduced. And as the film progresses and we get more action-packed scenes, he's an imposter! It's so bad.
The hydrogen gas level's too high. One spark and the reactor will blow. I have to stop it.
Her stuff in the submarine is really bad.
We're safe from the radiation. As long as the reactor coolant doesn't burst. If he had gotten the plutonium rod in the reactor, we could have written off the whole city. James!
The submarine itself is a crappy way to end a movie because it's so claustrophobic. Remember, the last two movies
sucked to work on.
Yeah, the last two movies, we had GoldenEye, we had the satellite facility, there's a lot of space, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of way of sneaking around. But even when we get into the fight scenes, they're fighting in the satellite, it's all great. When we get to Tomorrow Never Dies, we're on a boat again, but this boat at least feels like it has enough space where you could hide. There's a good geography to everything. Then we get to this movie and it's really, 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 really claustrophobic. Yes, there's the stakes of like, okay, we're gonna die because this boat is sinking and there's water filling up. That's great. But I guess maybe because I'm much more worried about them sinking to the bottom, that Renard putting the plutonium in the thing doesn't have me as worried for some reason. I'm just like, it doesn't, there's just a very big disconnect compared to if that scene took place with a nuclear device or something on the tower that they're at, or, you know, there could have been many other things where like maybe they were driving through Istanbul.
I can get it out over the bay.
I don't know, something. I don't think this doesn't make the movie the worst movie in the Bond list. I just don't think that. I think this is just more of me saying like, it's middle for me still. It's middle for me for still.
I get what you mean claustrophobic, but I don't think twice about, you know, oh, we're in a confined space and therefore that's bad. The claustrophobia of the ending doesn't bother me in the same way that for the prologue, I prefer everything taking place in the banker's office. And I don't want the big action scene with the Batman boat. I would rather it be that simple and not be the big Tomorrow Never Dies big dumb action movie ending. I'm fine with it just being these two guys fighting at the end. You know, they're choking each other out and he's like,
are you really gonna commit suicide for her?
You forget. I'm already dead.
Haven't you heard? So is she.
That is the silliest thing in the movie. That is probably the silliest thing. They're choking each other and they're having a whole conversation.
Bond's like this, And Renard's like, Renard's like still speaking just fine, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That might be the one payoff for the whole feeling pain, not feeling pain thing. You got Bond there, clearly feeling the choking pain, and then Renard's talking normal. Like, I guess that works. That whole storyline climaxed with these two knuckleheads choking each other out. Haven't you heard? So is she. I like that moment. And then when he freaks out.
Yeah, when he freaks out, that's good.
You're lying.
But everything else about that fight scene is weak to me. Like,
I think, Nanz, going back to what you were saying, the shoulder thing should have paid off and the super strength should have paid off. Instead, what you get is...
Welcome to my nuclear family.
Which, again, is stupid.
I thought the writers were like, oh, this is so clever. I want to put this in a movie so bad. Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, quick. We're all spitballing. We're in the writer's room. What are some jokes that have to do with nuclear?
Welcome to my nuclear family.
That's a thing, right? No, that doesn't make any. There was no setup or punchline to that.
Out of place in that whole scene too. It just feels so weird. It's like we need something cool to say here. Let's say that,
and it's not cool at all.
No, it's not.
I'm okay with the claustrophobia and the simple quality of it. Everything that happens in the sub, I'm okay with. Other than that was the perfect time to conclude the shoulder and super strength narratives and have those drive the ending. The only other exception maybe would be the moment that Bond makes the sub dive, as opposed to he's in the middle of a struggle and they run into it. Because remember, Bond is a Navy commander. You'd think he would know a little better.
So we're going up then.
Slight miscalculation.
You know, like we talked about in other films about how like a lot of times it's the villain's hubris that gets the best of him as far as like his special strength. Like Dr. No, he had these steel hands and like it's the best of him or whatever. In this movie, it's like you would expect that to be a thing, but it's not.
Like maybe somehow he needs that to be able to take the radiation he's exposed to when putting the rod in, or like something.
Oh my God,
where
like, Nanz, yes, that would have been awesome if as he was feeding in the plutonium, his hands were melting. And he couldn't even feel it. And even if it wasn't even the radiation, what if it was just massive amounts of heat from holding that rod and he's just...
Here you go.
How cool would that have been? And then on the other side, you have him squeezing Bond's shoulder and Bond is putty in his hands. Bond wants to fight back, but he can't because his shoulder is... Meanwhile, his other hand is melting because he's feeding it into the reactor. And then at that point, Bond is completely helpless, and what they should have done to make us like Christmas Jones more is have her do the science thing, where she grabs the gas thing and goes up, and then she rescues Bond. That would have been perfect, but instead, Bond somehow knows to feed the hydrogen gas back into the thing, and it'll shoot out. Like, that's something that Christmas would have known.
You're the scientist, you tell me.
I guess not. Now suddenly Bond's the nuclear physicist. You literally had one job this entire time, Toots. Instead, she just lays there helplessly watching Bond do what she should have been doing. What a wasted opportunity for her to do some science to save Bond in exchange for him having saved her.
James!
Well, I've forgotten you, eh?
I rescued you for 2 reasons. To help me take down the bad guy, and then afterwards you'd my and then I'd you dumb bitch. Like I said, I'm totally okay with it being claustrophobic and simple and small as long as you're doing exactly what we just laid out.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, but I would want like a Red Grant fight scene. That's so much better than what we got. They're just like in a wet, slippery environment.
That's what I also mean by like the environment. I think for the end of the film doesn't really work. And again, that is something that could have been as simple as the art direction, where they decided like this is what the thing's going to look like, and this is how that's going to play out. And that's as simple as the director saying, no, I want something different. I want it to look like this. So that when we do the fight scene, it plays out a little bit better, or it's a little bit more interesting of a fight. Yep. This is why I'm saying I think that the movie just needed a better storyteller behind it, even though that he succeeds in the areas that I think they were trying to like hit those notes. I think that the notes that it needed to, and I think most Bond films do, if I'm being very frank, they need to hit that action movie beats that like yeah, as much as people, it's like, well, like much as like you were saying, those are the things that bore you, but like that's why most people are here to watch the movie. They want to see the action. They want to see the fun bullshit Batman boat chase. And granted, yeah, they could have written the Batman boat chase better as far as how it fits into the plot, but it's still one of the more entertaining pieces of the film by far. Like I remember, like that's one of the things that sticks out to me when I think of this movie is like, oh yeah, that's the one with the cool boat chase in the beginning. And then I kind of was like, this is the one that ends in the submarine. Yeah, this is the one that ends in the submarine. But like, as far as the set pieces go, I think it just needed an action set piece director. And as much as the last movie is a big, dumb action movie, I feel like it's just so much easier to sit through and I'll be like, yeah, I like this. This is fun.
Dude, what you're saying is that Spotswood and Michael Apt should have teamed up and Spotswood does all the action.
Sure.
And Michael does all the character stuff and then weave that together.
To be fair, that is actually sort of how a lot of movies are made in a way. Most big budget action movies, whether it's a Marvel superhero movie or whatever, there's usually the director who gets all the credit everybody talks about, and they're usually in charge of the scenes of people talking in rooms and yada, 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 and to an extent the action. But usually when it comes to stunts, action sequences, you know, chase scenes or big fight scenes, that's usually done by a second unit director. So in a way, movies are always made that way, where you always have two different directors making the movie in a way. One's dealing with the big action stuff. One's dealing with more of like what the movie really is, the story shit. And I think the movie excels on the story shit. I just think the stuff with the action is like, could be better.
Lots of all the action is just like, doesn't matter practically. It's almost like there's a disconnect from the action from the actual story.
I see them as story beats, right? So for me, the Parahawk thing is just a method for Elektra to legitimize her victimhood. And then the helicopters with the saw blades is just a story point to emphasize the fact that Zukovsky is a loose end that needed to be taken out.
Those blades were meant for you. What does Elektra King want you dead for?
As I get older, I don't care about those scenes, and so I'm thinking about Denise Richards' chest as I'm watching it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll give you this. I think a couple episodes back, we talked about how at a certain point, these movies came to a point where like the writers, the producers, the stunt choreographers sit in a room and they think of like set pieces. And a lot of these action movies are set this way, where Tom Cruise sits in a room and says, I want to go to space in the next movie. And they're like, okay, well, let's write that in the movie. How are we going to do it? This movie is a proof that that's not like the other way of not doing it that way is not always the best for an action movie. At least I think it is. Like, at least that's how I feel about this movie is like, yeah, you nail down the script and the plot makes sense and you checked all these boxes, but at the end of the day, is the audience going to sit there and be like, I had a great time? Because remember, when we talked about GoldenEye, I feel like those things are in balance, in balance. Like they are that the action set pieces and the story stuff, I think they're like this the whole time.
Motivated action.
They're like this. I think the story stuff in this movie is like this, and I think the action stuff's so far down. Exactly. Versus the last movie we saw was kind of like this.
Yes,
and it's just kind of for me. It's kind of for me. I'm like, I feel like I want this. I could be swayed about where this ranks, but for me personally, I feel the same way. Is that this movie? I get what you're saying, Charlie. But I rather would watch Tomorrow Never Dies than I'd watch The World Is Not Enough most of the time. And even so, I would even watch the next movie probably before I'd want to watch this movie for other reasons, but we'll get to that movie.
I think for me, I for years, there's been that lingering question that you and I have probably asked each other, which is that when it comes to Pierce Brosnan, clearly GoldenEye is the cream of the crop. And then, not to get ahead of ourselves, but typically Die Another Day is the opposite of that.
Exactly.
But then Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough. Usually, it's like the only question is which one is better. Yeah. And I think I used to say that the Brosnan movies go in descending order for me. They start big and they slowly dwindle. But I think after this process of going through the movies one by one and now getting to that question, I think ultimately, as much as I have Tomorrow Never Dies as a solid guilty pleasure, I think the story elements alone make The World Is Not Enough superior for me. The intrigue and the drama of the King family alone elevates it above the cartooniness and the shameless guilty pleasure that Tomorrow Never Dies was. Regardless of, because what you guys are saying is that the action's kind of weak, but to kind of like throw in my consistent points of not caring too much about action and championing rather bad guy and bad guy motivation. Like, obviously, you watch any of our previous episodes, what I harp on the most is like, I don't care about Bond girls. And action is just kind of like a cherry on top. What I generally champion is bad guy and bad guy plots and bad guy motivation. And those things drive my opinions. And that's why, again, I think Tomorrow Never Dies is a middle-low movie, and The World's Not Enough is a middle-high.
For me, ranking it, I place this directly below Tomorrow Never Dies.
And okay. That's kind of where I'm going is like, I feel like these should be right next to each other. Like that's where like, I'm at. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'm just like, these should be next to each other.
Do you want to hear my proposition?
You're like, oh, it should be number 3 because I'm a piece of shit.
Guess where I want it.
I'm going to guess 8.
Bravo! Bravo, Nanz. I'm at number 8, right below Dr. No, above A View to a Kill.
I was going to say, like...
Yeah, and I honestly think that's perfect. Maybe. I think that's the perfect placement. Let me just go through that. It simply does not break the important threshold that is Dr. No. There's no universe where you can say this defeats Dr. No. But remembering the struggle that was the A View to a Kill episode, Christmas Jones is right out of the Pussy Galore or Stacey Sutton playbook, the tough working girl who's always beating men away with a stick but softens to Bond. Stacey Sutton and Christmas Jones are the same obnoxious and annoying Bond girl.
Are you here for a reason? Or are you just hoping for a glimmer?
This being something of a remake of A View to a Kill, they have the same scientist character who's only there to explain to Bond what the doomsday scenario is, and then otherwise they're just there to be hot. The only exception, of course, being when Christmas Jones disarms the nuke in the pipeline. So she at least has that. I think she deserves to be right above Miss Sutton. I think she's just as bad as Stacey Sutton, but I think she beats her. And then Pierce Brosnan, as usual, is awesome. And I think A View to a Kill's story just doesn't hold up next to The World Is Not Enough. Bond's relationship to Elektra versus Bond's complete lack of a connection to Zorin might be enough. The story between the two of them is great. And regardless of the action not being as great, I mean, I'll remind you of how the two of you fucking hated the firefighter scene and all that. The World's Not Enough has these interesting twists and turns, whereas A View to a Kill has some mystery, but is pretty straightforward in its Goldfinger remakiness. The World's Not Enough takes that Goldfinger inspiration and runs with it until it becomes something else entirely. Because of Elektra King, it manages to become something else entirely. It does not surpass Dr. No. That's a joke. But when you go back through our thought process of A View to a Kill and For Your Eyes Only, I think it's better than those movies, even if the action you guys are saying is not as great. I think it's better than For Your Eyes Only and A View to a Kill that have that Roger Moore goofiness. And this movie doesn't have that Roger Moore goofiness, but again, regardless of Christmas Jones, it still has such a better story by way of the King family. Even if it's confusing at times, that story trumps everything else for me.
You can't fault Elektra King, that character, the plot, like it's hard. And Charlie, you place those things like at the very top of your level of importance for Bond movies.
And that's what I have a problem with some of the. It's like you got to have balance, and I feel like when you have balance,
somehow
those things
doesn't.
Like that's why I think GoldenEye works as a number one, because those things are in balance. Like you have a really good story, you have really good action, you have really good characters, all that stuff works really well.
Yeah.
When one element is out of balance, it throws the whole movie off in a way that just like it's more of a gut reaction, emotional reaction to the film.
But that's why this movie isn't going up against GoldenEye, though. It's going up against A View to a Kill in my eyes.
I get that. I get what you're saying. My point is, and I probably should have been harder on this, is that sometimes I really do think that it's not just what the movie's about, but how you tell that story. And I feel like it's just like this film in particular is an example of how you can have a really, really great story. And I'm totally on board with that. I just don't think that it's as, I feel like I leave this movie with, I feel like I wasted my time. And then when I leave Tomorrow Never Dies, I always feel like that was fun. Like that's, I don't know, Nanz, if that's how you feel, but that's how I feel.
Diamonds Are Forever is also fun, but it's near the bottom.
True, but we also know that that movie's got a lot of dumb in it.
Yeah, Tomorrow Never Dies.
A lot of dumb.
Big, dumb action movie, to say it for the millionth time, you know?
Yeah. I just don't know if it's that high. I don't know if it's like right below Dr. No.
Well, let's talk about the things the movie does get right. I love the scene when Renard and Elektra reunite. We see them for the first time together. And she's kind of cold.
So smooth. So warm.
How would you know?
Why are you like this? Because Bond is dead. It's what you wanted.
Of course it's what I wanted.
He was a good lover.
What do you think? I wouldn't feel anything?
I feel nothing.
Because he can't feel anything, he's kind of bland now. He can't make passionate love to her. He's like, you miss Bond, don't you? Like, his Bond gave it to you good, and then here I am, and I, you know, whether he can get a hard on or not, he can't feel it.
Your father My father was nothing.
And it's right before that we get a speech from Renard talking about how much he cares about Elektra and what he thinks of her, outside of the guise of being her psychopathic kidnapper.
I hope you're proud of what you did to her.
I'm afraid it is you who deserve credit. When I took her, she was promise itself. And you left her at the mercy of a man like me. You ruined her. For what? To get to me. She's worth 50 of me.
For once, I agree with you.
Yes. And now we also share a common fate. You will die, along with everyone in the city.
The speech that Renard delivers to M here is perfect. It's just as poetic as Elektra sending her dad a deadly $5 million. It's delivering to M the same fate that she handed to Renard when she had 009 try to kill him. They both know that their time is limited. And as we know from watching the whole movie, Renard is constantly referring to how he's going to die soon, and this just haunts him, especially because he thinks he's found the love of his life, who he's now willing to give everything for. It's a great bad guy scene for the two of them, and then it begs the question of, does she actually love him, or is he just another guy that she's manipulating? I think that's what's so interesting about Elektra, is that she starts out as this frail little thing. And so she ropes guys in with this good girl, victim, I need to be rescued display, and then she cuts their balls off. Renard kind of turns out to be something of a, what's the other movie where you think that somebody's...
For Your Eyes Only.
Is that what I'm thinking of?
Yeah, because For Your Eyes Only, you think that the good guy is going to be this other dude, and then it turns off to be, he's actually the villain.
I might be thinking of Bane in Dark Knight Rises, where you think Bane is the main bad guy, and then... Renard and Bane are literally the same character. The central theme driving their character is pain, and they have this supposed super strength, even though Renard is kind of scrawny. Both appear to be the main villain, but they're really just the blunt instrument of a woman that they're secretly in love with, who cheats on them with the good guy, then reveals herself to be the bad guy to the good guy, and then tortures the good guy. And then for her sake goes on a suicide mission to destroy a city with a nuke.
Oh,
and remember, Talia ended up... Talia is based on Tracy Bond.
That's a good comparison. That is a good comparison, because, yeah, he thinks he's fall in love with this girl, and then it turns out she's actually the daughter of the guy he sort of semi-killed.
My father. And my father?
Yeah, like Renard ends up basically being a red herring. Like the whole movie is Renard, and then it turns out that even Renard is
he's like he's the executioner of the master plan.
It's literally no different from Bane. Pause for a moment. So after we had already recorded, our buddy K1 posted this comment, but it's kind of relevant, so I'm going to read it right now. It was the first Bond movie I saw in theaters, and I had no idea what was going on and did not like it for a long time. After revisiting the entire Bond franchise, this one became my second favorite of Brosnan's films. Renard is great and very menacing. I don't hate Christmas Jones like some people do, and the I don't know any doctor jokes line always kills me. Christopher Nolan ripped off this entire movie in Dark Knight Rises. The villain that can't feel pain, the lady that is the real villain, daddy issues, nuking a city. What a hack! So, good eye, K1. Anyway, unpause. I don't mean to drag Batman into this again, but Bane is the same thing. Bane is in love with Talia.
Bruce Wayne travels to Gotham really quickly, and the same in this movie. Bond goes to Kazakhstan to Air Jabani, and
I'm going to redraw the map.
She's just this monster who's like, I have always had a power over men. And she does that obviously with her body, but more so by always playing the victim.
So now do you believe me?
And then revealing herself to be a mass manipulator. And then the whole plot of the movie is that she does that on a global scale, where she's going to convince everybody that she's a victim, even while she's literally ruling the world with the oil.
And when I'm through, the whole world will know my name. My grandfather's name, the glory of my people.
No one will believe this meltdown was an accident.
Ha! They will believe. They will all believe.
And that's where her relationship with Bond is perfect. What better bad guy is there than, I mean, other than having Alec Trevelyan, who's literally an equal but opposite so far as they're both double O's, but one's good and one's evil. This is Bond's greatest nemesis, is a woman who's really hot and irresistible. And Bond can't even put two and two together when he's around her, you know, and that, like, those are the things I care about. And then Christmas Jones, I care about Christmas Jones as much as I care about Mary Goodnight, which is to say that she's just a hot chick there to be in a bikini. But the real importance of the movie is the relationship between Bond and the bad guy.
I get your points. I also get that this list is, I think, in my eyes, because it's like there's a lot of stuff that I don't agree with.
I think the list is perfect.
But even if I think the list is the list is not my point of view of the Bond films. It is our point of view of the Bond films as a whole.
Yes.
We've talked about the points. We've argued these things out. You seem to, like, this is where you and I are like the what's in the Dark Knight, the immovable object and the
unstoppable force.
When it comes to these things. I tend to think, I know you're like harpooning on just villain, Bond. Those are the things that a movie makes great. I'm like, there's more to it than just that element. And that's what I've always tried to argue with some of these other movies that I feel like ended up in the list. And I'm like, that man with the golden gun's not looking too pretty to me still. It's not that great of a movie. And you're like, but the villain's great. And
Scaramanga!
I'm sure there's an endless list of movies you can cite that have really cool ideas and a key, like, antagonist and a protagonist that really have a great thing, but everything else around it sucks.
Yeah, and that's like, and I'm just trying to reiterate this point of, like, again, it's like you can write a great story, but if you tell it in a way, it's not a great story.
I don't know if this is told in a way though.
But here's my thing about it. Here's what I was gonna say. I don't think you're completely wrong, because, you know, I do think about it compared to the other films, and in my head, I'm thinking it more in terms of between Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough. Like, that's how I'm thinking about it, right? But when we add these other films into the mix, I agree. I don't think it goes above Dr. No. A View to a Kill has some really fucking goofy moments that I really hate. For Your Eyes Only, I think, has some really good stuff. Honor Majesty's Secret Service, I think, is really underrated because you guys all suck. Thunderball, we've talked about for odds and ends. And this is kind of where I like land in my head a little bit with World Not Enough, just because there's some stuff in this script that I'm like, with the Denise Jones, like, Denise Richards, what you doing here, girl? That stuff, like, to me, like, irks Thunderball stuff. But as we talked about it, like, it's not too far off because there's a lot of
Thunderball's
other
a transition movie between
yes,
good
Thunderball is
stuff and like okay, this like is on
but
the
Thunderball's like heavy with that plot detail crap that we're kind of striving, and obviously Octopussy also kind of lands into that realm of like this plot's really fucking confusing. You sway me though on the plot not being as bad as those movies. So I get your pass on why it's better than Octopussy and Thunderball. I totally get that. You know how I feel about On Her Majesty's Secret Service. You know how I feel about Secret Service. And I feel that way because I do feel like the story, much like how you feel about this movie, the story's really good. I feel like On Her Majesty's Secret Service's story, as far as it being about Bonds and his relationships and all that stuff and how it affects his job, questioning his job, I think that stuff's really good. And I think that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like somewhere in between where you're at because I'm like, I get why Nanz would be like, I'd rather watch Tomorrow Never Dies.
Tomorrow Never Dies, I think, has a strong relationship, a strong correlation with Diamonds Are Forever. I think both those movies.
I get it. I totally
don't care. But we put Tomorrow Never Dies up because regardless, it has clarity of plot and it is enjoyable. As stupid as it is,
yes.
It's got a fun bad guy.
Yes.
And it's like, it's just Bond doing his Bond thing without caring about being smart.
Yeah.
This movie is smarter. As much as it could have been a lot smarter, it is smarter than Tomorrow Never Dies.
You have to kind of want to applaud that, and that's what makes this as hard for me, is I feel like where I would want to place it is more based off like, I'm like, I like this movie more than that movie. But the list says otherwise. So I have to go based off the list. That's where I'm at.
Before we've said, what would you rather put in? We've fallen back to that.
We've fallen to that trap of like, which movie would you rather put in?
But I'm not tempted to do that this time. I'm tempted more so to reward The World Isn't Enough for not being a big dumb action movie because, there are times where maybe you want to throw in Tomorrow Never Dies above Goldfinger because you really do want to watch the Michael Bay movie.
Yeah.
Because it's, I don't know. You have a party going on, and you're already way too drunk and your brain's not working. Whatever it may be.
So you just want to stare at Denise Richards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do.
Exactly.
I do. But I think here's the thing though. I think another part of it is, and I hate saying this because A View to a Kill is a movie that I think should have been way lower on the list. And, but I will also say this, I can get through that movie fairly easily. And I do think that action wise, it's like, okay, we got an old crotchety man fighting these villains.
He's an imposter.
That's not James Bond. That man's 63 years old. James Bond's a 35-year-old secret agent.
I think what it is
why is this 63-year-old banging Stacey Sutton and all these other 20-year-old chicks?
And hanging onto a fire truck ladder.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Like, listen, A View to a Kill is probably just way more fun. I think that's the thing. I think that's where I
love A View to a Kill.
This is my problem with this list is that I feel like we are fighting between, and I think this goes all the way back to Goldfinger versus From Russia with Love. We're fighting between this good story thing, or at least what we think is good story, and what is good movie as far as having a great time at the theater. This goes beyond ranked. This is stuff that we're dealing with now as far as going to the movies. Do we want to go into a movie to enjoy ourselves, or do we want to go to a movie to think hard about why Michael G. Wilson has a hard-on for convoluted plots? That's that's just the whole thing.
Michael G.
Michael G. Wiz. No, Mikey G. Wiz.
Mikey G. Wiz. Travis TLC. I don't know.
He
Chinese.
actually listed, didn't he list what that actually means in Chinese?
The Chinese at the start of my name is Eye of Gold. Golden Eye. Eye of Gold is Golden Eye. So
he's already a fan of the show. I love it.
It's awesome. Yeah.
I love it.
Again,
thank you for coming on the show.
Travis TLC says, I think this is one of Brosnan's best Bond films. It's so ambitious and has one of the best villains ever and only main female villain. Elektra King is such a great villain for so many reasons. I agree. She takes Bond's biggest weakness and turns it on him. Yeah, again, blood is in his dick, not his brain. Christmas Jones is obviously the low point. Yup. And a view into how the next film is, but even with her, I still love this movie. I'm one to agree. Renard is sadly underused, and so is Apparent Condition of No Pain. Yeah, we covered that.
Yep.
It's the first time M is not only in the field, but an integral part of the story, and they do it so well. I really can't fathom beyond Christmas Jones why this film gets so much hate other than a residual hate from Die Another Day. The score is incredible. The main theme is incredible. I give it a solid 8 out of 10. And then later when I asked him, where do you rank it? He said, overall, number 3. So Travis TLC, high praise for this movie. I'm not as high, but
3.
But I still think it's, again, middle high. The Entertainer says, for me, this is Brosnan's best performance, but not his best film. He really carries it together with Sophie Mercure, as Elektra, who complements him perfectly as both the lover and the villain. Renard is okay, and so is Christmas Jones, who I think gets a lot of hate because she's a bland character, but is still perceived as the main Bond girl of the film. But considering that Elektra is already the real Bond girl while doubling as the main villain, both Christmas and Renard should be considered side characters, although I will admit that I find Renard to also be a pretty captivating villain, although a bit underused. I like the fact that he really doesn't want anything more than to create havoc and leave Elektra to pick up the pieces since he's prepared to die for her and doesn't want money like Blofeld, Zoran, Kananga, and the other villains usually does. Again, yeah, his whole world changes when he falls in love with her. Same with Bond. Falling in love with this girl is just bad news for everybody. The reason I like Brosnan so much in this one is because he doesn't just get to act cool while still getting some great action scenes like the long intro sequence, which I think is one of the best ones. But I feel the film explores Bond as a pretty damaged guy. He comes off so good in this one as an assassin that uses sex as a way to get information, but also to cope with himself.
And what about you? What do you do to survive?
I take pleasure. You turned Renard.
Just like you. Only you were even easier.
Which is why Elektra gets the better of him as he believes they share a similar traumatic background. I think the skiing scene really conveys it considering its similarities to OHMSS. Yeah, we covered that. That is also why the scene where he kills Elektra works so well, as he's both a stone-cold assassin in not hesitating in killing her, but afterwards leans over and caresses her. Yeah, totally. With the addition of M's facial reaction, we get a short glimpse of how messed up he actually is, but only for a couple of seconds as he immediately continues the mission by jumping out of the window. With that said, I don't think there's much more in this film that stands out. Good action, but not great. David Arnold's score is good, but the title song is garbage. Well, it was performed by garbage. What do you expect?
Good. What do you get?
What I like about this song, though, is that if you pay attention to the lyrics, it's clearly written from the perspective of Elektra.
The world is not enough, but it is such a perfect place to start my love. And if you're strong enough, together we can take the world apart, my love.
Zukovsky is a good ally, but way out of character considering how he was portrayed in GoldenEye. But I don't really care. He's fun.
I think I agree with you. It's like time has passed, things have changed. Like I'm okay with that. You know?
Yeah, I think he's fun.
Yeah, I like him in the role. I like him in the film.
The entire pipeline plot is pretty uninteresting, and why do we even have to watch Bond protect an oil pipeline? A part of me always wants Renard to blow it up. As a final, are you an anarchist? As a final note, I like the fact that this is the first time M gets personally involved in the story, hinting at what they would later do in Skyfall. The relation between Bond and Elektra is the high point of the film, but the rest is, for me, is pretty average. Like I said, I think this is Brosnan's best performance, but at the moment, I rank it as his second best film after GoldenEye, followed by DAD, Die Another Day, and Tomorrow Never Dies. In my overall ranking, this film sits at number 11. So that's a middle argument.
It's a middle, yeah.
Blastoise says, perhaps
Ethan Toys says,
perhaps Brosnan's best performance. His charisma seems to have sharper fangs. One thing I noticed, though, is he's always pointing his Walther at people like Zukovsky when they don't pose a threat.
Yep.
But again, it's I think that's hilarious. Compared to Connery, who held his gun casually at his hip, reminds me of police procedurals where they always have it out to create fake tension. But like, again, you know, when Zukovsky addresses that, like, why can't you just say hello like a normal person? You know, like, I think I enjoy that.
Yeah,
it's like a thing between them. Starting back in GoldenEye, it's a thing between them. When the cigarette girl at the pre-title sequence says, "Not from him."
I can protect you. Do you understand? I can protect you.
Not from him.
Which is terrible. Renard doesn't exactly live up to this Blofeld level tease, but he and Elektra are both classic, adding their own baggage to the psychological deformity roster. Would have liked Renard's superpower to come into play more in the final fight. But Bond does learn from Elektra to exploit his weakness for emotional pain. I don't find Dr. Jones any less believable than Dr. Givehead. I prefer ditzy over boring, and she brings a certain male fantasy element that had been lacking in the last two.
Okay, pause on there. We didn't talk about this. This movie, I think, is way sexier than the last two movies. And that was something that's like, this is me saying, giving the film a compliment in that, while yes, the action, I think, is lacking, and you sit in the movie and I kind of feel like this movie's a little boring and dry. That being said, Bond sleeps with like 3 different women in this film, and it's not just off camera like, oh yeah, he slept with so and so.
It's like hot every time.
It's very like, oh, when he sees that doctor and he's like, give me a clean bill of health, and like he unzips her.
Let's just skirt the issue, shall we?
I see the good doctor has cleared you. Notes you have exceptional stamina.
I'm sure she was touched by his dedication to the job in hand.
Moneypenny gets jealous of the doctor.
Yeah.
You know, like Moneypenny immediately...
I think she kind of chastised him for...
She immediately understands that...
She's like, you slept with Bond.
It's just office drama.
Remember in Tomorrow Never Dies where she has that girlfriend moment with M? And then in this one, it's another one, but it's the reverse where it's like, F you, doctor. You slept with my future husband, you bitch. You know, like she's slut-shaming the doctor.
Yeah, she's slut-shaming her coworker.
And then Bond is just eating it up. He's just so pleased with himself.
And then every scene with Elektra, sex scene, pillow talk scene. This movie has pillow talk scenes, which I don't think the last movie had a pillow talk scene. We've seen those in the past. We've seen the pillow talk scene of like Bond talking to the chick and they kind of talk about information. And that's something I think we totally miss. Like we haven't really talked about that. Yeah. But there's a thing about sex and men, and we love sex and we like watching sex happen. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for a story element thing, it's kind of like the sex is the action scene, but we get the story stuff with this pillow talk scenes.
And it's James Bond's MO too.
And we get 2 of those. Like we get, and both times we see Alexa like very, like barely dressed. And I think at even one point we get like a nip slip in there too. Yeah. Like it's a sexy movie. So I will give the movie compliments on that.
And it's all motivated. I will give you that good.
Yeah.
If you give me the clean bill of health and, you know, if you show good stamina. Like and it's a fun little sex scene where they start making out. Like their dialogue is fun. And then Elektra, obviously there's major purpose there because the whole time she's putting off that she's innocent. She's innocent. It all goes back to that moment where Bond is looking at her debriefing where she's like, he was shouting all the time. And he touches her face and he's like wiping away digital tears. Remember when he's doing that to Tracy, when he's wiping the tears away? Again, that goes back to the pitch you talked about.
Damaged women. He loves damaged women.
Exactly. She's my Tracy, and then she turns out to be his Blofeld. That is a profound way of putting it. He's literally wiping her tears away, and then it turns out that she's evil. So and then at one point, Renard's like, you should have had her when she was innocent, bro. Does it piss you off that I broke her in for you?
You should have had her before, when she was innocent. How does it feel to know I broke her in for you?
Bond reacts so heavily to that line.
To know I broke her in for you.
I usually hate killing an unarmed man. Cold-blooded murder is a filthy business.
A man tires of being executed.
But in your case, I feel nothing.
Just like you.
It's a well-known character trait of James Bond that he doesn't like killing, but Elektra's hooks are so deep inside of him that he's going to throw that out the window and take pleasure in killing this guy who supposedly raped her. And that's the moment where it's like, okay, Bond has been completely taken by this chick. Bond is way too emotionally involved. He's out of character in a really solid way. Tarkovsky is great and gets more to do than give Bond the bad guy's name.
It's true.
Very true. The action has a certain adrenaline I felt was lacking in Tomorrow and more high-class locations, even if they skip around a bit. Many set pieces don't flow with the plot and are just thrown in like we saw in Moonraker. I don't know if I agree with that.
I disagree with that. I think that the adrenaline's lacking in this film.
But there's nothing like, in Moonraker, you just had the sight gag of that stupid-ass gondola. There isn't anything like that in this.
No. There's something close.
What's the closest thing?
When the boat goes out of the water.
He's not wrong, because I was thinking the same thing when I watched that movie. I was like, watching this, like, this reminds me of Moonraker.
You mean when he launches?
He launches up and then he gets on
he's
to
like driving
land.
around on
He's legitimately driving on land, and I'm thinking, like, how does that work?
But and that's stupid because it would immediately just fall over. Like, that is dumb. But it's still just a part of the chase, as opposed to the gondola scene is just a sight gag.
It is.
You don't need.
Yeah.
You might as well complain about how Bond launches out of the water and then manages to jump out of the boat and grab the hot air balloon.
Sure.
That's what I mean. That whole chase is stupid. I think that was where the movie decided to be a popcorn eating movie as opposed to a smart one.
And
but Nanz keeps saying he likes the chase. Like,
and that's where I'm at. It's like the chase, as it is. If it doesn't make sense to the plot, I get it. I 100% understand what you're saying. I just think the chase is a lot of fun and it's very memorable. And I feel like these movies need those moments.
Highlights are Bond's final ski chase and one of the series' best boat chases. There you go. Originally, GoldenEye was to feature a big battle with the helicopter versus the BMW. That's why Q shows Bond all those gadgets, which he never uses. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It got backlogged to Tomorrow, and this film, I will grant Tomorrow the better chopper fight. Okay. This one is on a crappy backlot with Bond running all over the place with no real strategy. So it's a mixed bag, but has some of the best action, plot, and villains of the Brosnan era. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think it has the best action, but the plot and the story stuff I think works, and the villain works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm slowly trying to explain that I don't necessarily think those things mean good movie overall. But
yeah.
But as our list stands, I'm not 100% against what you're saying, if that makes sense.
Alfred Valerie. Alfred.
Please don't make fun of our audience.
Alfred.
Please don't make fun of our audience.
Speaking of Batman boats, that's
Please
Batman.
don't make fun of our audience.
Alfred,
you're a terrible person. Alfred wanted to talk to us. I want to hear what Alfred has to say.
My history with The World Is Not Enough is interesting for me. I had been studying in Glasgow, that's in Scotland. At the time it came out, the only thing I remember is everyone in the Scottish audience groaning at the Christmas only comes once a year. When the film appeared on home video, I repeatedly watched it, particularly the opening, and reflected on what might have been had the writers fully committed to the betrayal angle. I think he's kind of reflecting what I was saying. He's saying there that he likes the opening.
Yeah.
Again, the moment that bomb goes off in MI6.
And then you cut straight to the credits.
Cut to the credits, yeah.
Stick the boat chase somewhere else.
It doesn't. Well, you couldn't even put it in the movie, really. But I mean,
I want that boat chase. Give me that boat
like
chase.
Bond chase after the sub in that, or something stupid, whatever. Huevos Rants says, I like The World Is Not Enough a lot. Feel like they tried bringing it back to a more classic Bond feel. By classic, I think he means Roger Moore.
I agree.
The pre-title scene is fantastic. Pierce is the business in this flick. Q has his last scene, which is amazing. Totally. The title song by Garbage is great. I think the Bond girls kind of lack in this one, even though Denise Richards is still a sexy babe. And the villainess is the villainess is sexy as well. And that torture, Christ, Huevos, you misspelled like every. I think Huevos used Google Translate because, okay, torture. That torture scene is like that scene from Casino when they hit Bond in the nuts. Totally. The other bad guy has that bullet slowly moving through his brain. I honestly like Tomorrow Never Dies a teeny bit more than this one. Interesting. But this one is kind of underrated. I love Pierce's Bond. Love you guys. Can't wait for your further videos. Huevos, we love you too. I especially love Huevos' name. Huevos Rants. I've never looked into the channel, and I don't
But now
want
you
to.
have to.
I don't want to because I want to just assume that, you know, Huevos means eggs. I just want to assume that he's just ranting about eggs. just ranting about eggs. And nobody knows why.
Huevos rancheros, huevos con chorizo.
Yeah,
I agree with a lot of what he has to say. I'm just in that boat of like I like Tomorrow Never Dies a little bit more, just slightly more than this.
Is it because it's
They're
a guilty
close.
pleasure, or do you think it deserves more?
That's okay.
merit?
That's what I'm trying to go with when I'm talking to you about this. Is that our list is and you're like our list isn't it's perfect. I'm
Our
like
list is perfect.
our list is
Our list is perfect.
But again, like I said, the list is the combination of your opinion, my opinion, Nan's
The
opinion.
list is sacred.
Okay, whatever, dude.
Blasphemy! Blasphemy!
But when I sit down and I watch Tomorrow Never Dies, and I'm just like, Elliot Carver is a genius.
Genius.
He's not a genius. When I watch the movie and I'm like, Elliot Carver is ridiculous, but I am still on board for this movie. I am still on board for what's going on. I just like want to know what happens to Bond, and I'm so
Very
bored.
interesting.
It's just like I'm very captivated. I'm very stuck to the screen. This movie, I find myself getting really bored with it at times. That being said, not saying that anything you've said prior to about the plot, the story, the script doesn't not work. I just think that the problems with this movie, that things that bog it down, for sure, 100%, Denise Richards' performance and the way that the director kind of goes about telling the story, even though like the story kind of works. But I think the story
this
in
is
itself
no
just is
different
boring.
than the Man with the
I'm
Golden
talking in
Gun
circles.
episode where you're like, I hate Goodnight, and I go, I don't care about Goodnight. I care about Scaramanga. This is no
Yeah.
different.
I agree Denise Richards is not a good part of this movie, but it doesn't like ruin the movie for me. She's not why I place it.
Stacey Sutton is obnoxious, but really hot, but it doesn't ruin Elektra for me.
I think for me, at least, I think when you compare it to View to a Kill, I'm like, it's better than View to a Kill.
Whatever the best part is about A View to a Kill, it's not as good as the best part about this movie, which
Sure.
is
Sure.
Elektra.
Yeah.
Elektra, King, and James Bond, their interaction, Renard, all of that is like spot on, really, really
Cool.
solid. A View to a Kill has a whole fire truck chase scene, and I'm like, oh god. And then you got Christopher Walken. He's pretty good, but
Christopher
there's a whole
Walken's
lot
Christopher
missing with
Walken.
his character. His character is like, okay, I want to know more about this whole like he was like a science project by the Nazis or whatever. Like,
And you never explain it.
yeah.
This plot story stuff is better. Yeah, you have this really cool Stockholm Syndrome story going on.
And then a reverse Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, but then you got Denise Richards' performance, and then I'm just thinking like Bond's got to deal with this the whole rest of the movie, and it's not an annoyance to him.
Replace Denise Richards with some nerdy guy that Bond gets
Yeah.
to like, and he dies or something. Like,
Yeah, Luigi.
Or just,
You know?
yeah.
What if this movie didn't have Christmas Jones at all, and not even a replacement? What if that just didn't exist?
I don't think it really would change it much for me. My brain just blocks out the existence of Christmas Jones.
I think there'd be more of a focus on Elektra. I think it would be genius.
Genius.
Yeah.
I think it would be a little more, again, the last two, Tomorrow Never Dies in this movie are both, in my book, they're both bogged down by me wishing that there was another universe where I could pull out a copy of the movie that doesn't have stupid choices, where GoldenEye just made good choices throughout the whole story. And it still has the big dumb action, but it all works within the context of the story.
Exactly.
Whereas these two films, make choices where you go, oh, I see what they're doing. Okay, they're just going back to Roger Moore stuff where it's like, whatever, it's a popcorn movie. So, but the smarter movie would have just gotten rid of Christmas Jones entirely.
Yep.
Get rid of the TNA of Christmas Jones. And then what that means is that you're fixated. Bond is fixated on what to do with Elektra because Bond could. She said, remember, she says at one point, remember the title of the film? What's the title of the film, boys?
The world is not enough.
Why does Bond say that?
I could have given you the world.
The world is not enough.
Foolish sentiment.
Family motto.
Because she says, I could have given you the world. Bond could have said, you know what? I love this chick. And just like Secret Service, f my job. F you, Queen. F you, King and Country. I love this chick. She and I are going to take over the world. Bond could have gone that route. And how cool would that have been if that was the temptation of loyalty to King and Country and Crown and all that crap? Or find his new Tracy and Blofeld at the same time, get with Blofeld and take over the world.
Was that offer ever on the table? Did she ever like offer that up?
That's what I mean. How interesting would that have been? But instead, he's gallivanting with big tits. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. That's where it's like, you have to wonder if the director did not like the idea of Christmas Jones and wanted to do his character piece, you know? Maybe that's why Peter Jackson didn't join up. He's like, I'm going to go make Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of praise for Pierce. That was in the comments as well. Like, Pierce is awesome. Again, and my whole thing is I always say that, like, I don't really ever kind of consider Bond's performance movie to movie because it's like, it's kind of the same every movie in my book. It's a guy, the character's a guy with ice in his veins. And I get it. They're all different actors.
But what you're referring to is, that's a definition of a character. It's a guy with an ice in his veins. Performance-wise, I do think there's way more than that. And I get what people are saying. We saw this with Connery. It's like Connery starts the roll off. And he's trying to figure it out. By the time he does Thunderball, I think Thunderball is like his best performance-wise compared to the other films. Because by that point, he's so comfortable. He understands how to do the role. Like, he's kind of worked out all the kinks of what his version of James Bond is. When he gets to You Only Live Twice, he's like, I don't even want to be here. And it kind of shows in his performance. Diamonds Are Forever, he doesn't really give a shit.
He's having fun.
Guten Abend.
All of that being said, I'm just saying that I think it makes sense why people would say this is his best performance as Bond, probably because he's done it 2 other films and now he's kind of gotten into the groove of the character. And so he kind of knows how to play the micro, not the macro. I think when you talk about it, it seems like you're talking about the macro of like, I just don't look at it because it's James Bond thing, James Bond. Yeah. And I think on the micro level, I think there's more instances of him like, oh yeah, he's doing a really great job here.
Well, what I see in this movie particularly is, if you recall from GoldenEye, I was talking about how Pierce Brosnan, he'll be all Roger Moore and he'll be all smiley. And then he'll go Connery and he'll just like, he'll put on these faces where like he can pull off the funny stuff.
See you back at the lodge.
And then he goes fierce. Pierce just goes fierce. Pierce fierce. Pierce fierce. He goes brutal. And I think that's why he may be the perfect Bond. Remember how it was like, oh, I'm Roger Moore. I don't want to beat up on Maude Adams or whatever. But with this, he's all, I'm Pierce. And then he just becomes like sociopath murderer. He has moments of just going fucking nuts. And I love that. I love that he can go so violent, you know, and then he can pull off a Bond joke.
I want to say this because it was something that I picked up on, and I don't know if you picked up on, but we were talking about him being like this perfect mix of Connery and Moore. When he says assets in that Spain scene, he says it like Sean Connery.
Perhaps you failed to take into account my hidden assets.
Like he says assets. I swear to God, he says it like assets. Yeah. And I hear it that way, and I'm like, is he doing an impression of Connery? And was just like, yeah, I'll just throw that in there. I'll just throw that in there.
Sneak it in and see if anybody notices.
And it's in there. It's in the movie, and I'm just, I love that. I love that he did that. Like, I think that's hilarious.
My hidden assets.
Assets. Do we have any more to say? Does Nanz want to? Here's what I'm saying with the ranking. Put it where you want to put it at 8, and here's the reason. Because I as much as I don't like A View to a Kill, I just like that just makes sense
But is
it makes sense because
You've
of
been
the
saying
list.
that you hate the list. I think the list is perfect. And
I hate
think
the
that-
list
I
because
think
of it's an argument.
McCurdy's trying
I
to
hate the
sabotage
list.
the list.
I'm sabotaging the list. I'm an
think-
anarchist.
I
You-
think-
all this
'cause here's
entire
the thing.
time,
I
Nanz
looked-
and I have been plotting to kill you.
It's like I'm wearing those headphones that you electrify like in Live and Let Die.
No, but I agree. I'm agreeing with you because where the list stands, and also because like trying to compare it to View to a Kill, and it's like big flaws in the View to Kill. The actor shouldn't be playing Bond. The Bond girl is annoying as
James!
Zoran's great, but it's like you kind of wish that this movie was for a younger Bond, and I feel like it would have worked better. This movie, on the other hand, the Bond girl's
James!
but the Bond girl is incredible, and you have that Honor Majesty Secret Service type reversal that they're trying to impose into the film with he thinks he finds his Tracy, but he really finds his Blofeld.
Oh yeah. I mean, arguably
Profound.
Elektra King is like one of the best bad guys we've had
It
so
is.
far.
Yeah, this is Pierce Brosnan's OHMSS. It's just too bad. This could have been a list topper had they gotten rid of Christmas Jones and just focused the story on Bond and Elektra and had her tempt him to come to the dark side, essentially. Quit the service and join me to take over the world. But Bond's loyalty is never once challenged like it is in other movies.
Stuff my orders. Go ahead, tell him what you want. If he fires me, I'll thank him for it.
My resignation, effective forthwith.
I'm not for hire.
Naturally, you do it for Queen and country.
And it could have been interesting, but instead, all of that potential was squandered for the sake of Miss Big Boobs. To your point, there are those similarities between The World Is Not Enough and A View to a Kill that go beyond them being a remake of each other with their connection to Goldfinger's plot.
Yeah.
Again, like you just laid out, it's, the Bond girl's annoying and like really, really hot, but annoying. And you kind of question why she's there at all. And then you have Zoran. Remember why we put Zoran below Dr. No? Is because Bond and Dr. No share a connection, whereas Zoran is just another megalomaniacal bad guy who Bond has no connection to. And that's a less interesting story than Goldfinger, where View to a Kill comes from, where they sit down and they talk and they have a battle of words before they have a physical battle. Elektra and her whole family story is so much more interesting than anything out of A View to a Kill. For all the reasons why we place A View to a Kill where it is, I think that The World Is Not Enough outclasses it.
As much as I argue about my whole thing about the action thing, I'm willing to just be like, okay, whatever. Based on
I can put the
firefighters.
boat scene over the firefighter.
Boat scene over the firefighters any day. I'm just like, and it's also because I just like,
That's
I'm
my
not gonna,
least favorite part of the movie.
I don't want to stress about this movie that much because I'm just like, it's middling. On my personal list, this movie goes below Tomorrow Never Dies, but the way that these films are ranked up together, I'm like, it's got to go above it. I hate you. I just really hate you. And I hate you because I hate this is where it's landing on the list, and it makes a lot of sense, and that's why I hate you.
It makes perfect sense. I think it is the perfect placement.
And that is why I hate you, because it makes sense. And
you're just upset that it's above Honor Majesty's Secret Service.
This list is that's what I'm trying to tell you, and you're like, no,
this
it's
list
not.
is perfect.
This list is my personal list on the Brosnan films. As it stands, until we watch Die Another Day and I change my mind, if I do change my mind, this movie's the bottom of that list only because of how fucking boring this movie is in comparison to the other 5 movies, or the other 4 movies. Sorry, the other 3 movies. I'd watch GoldenEye, I'd watch Tomorrow Never Dies, and then I'd watch Die Another Day, only because Die Another Day is just so much more fun. And then I'd watch this movie. And that's what you're talking about, guilty pleasure. I get
Remember
that.
when somebody said to us, they were like, you guys should maybe consider doing like a whatever they called it, where
a tier list.
A tier list,
yes,
because not every movie is like Diamonds Are Forever, but Diamonds Are Forever and Tomorrow Never Dies and the next film in the series share a common bond. And that common bond is James Bond. No, that common bond is that they are fun and they're big dumb action movies. And shameless. I still think that this list is sacrosanct, and I think every position of every movie has been well thought out based on the context of where it is next to the movies around it. So again, like, doesn't break Dr. No's simple perfection, and it would be insulting to put The World Is Not Enough above Dr. No. But A View to a Kill is where it's at because it breaches Thunderball's threshold of not being a dumb piece of shit, but it has more clarity of plot than something like Secret Service or For Your Eyes Only that still has goofy stuff. Like everything, there's a reason for everything being where it is. And based on those reasons, The World Is Not Enough, I still think, is perfectly situated at the top of the above Thunderball threshold, but below the Dr. No threshold. The top of the Thunderball is at 8, which is below the Dr. No threshold of 7. And I think, again, being the guy who fixates on bad guy, because bad guy is always going to be what drives your story. When it comes to story, I think it trumps Secret Service, For Your Eyes Only, and A View to a Kill. It may have the big dumb action stuff of Tomorrow Never Dies, but it doesn't have the goofy Roger Moore shit.
Charlie, let me live it this way. If you had placed it like at number 5, I would have been like, get f***ed. Like, that would have been my reaction. I'd be like, you can go get f***ed. You placing it below Dr. No, at least it shows that you're like, oh, I have some restraint and I realize this movie is not that good because of those things. I can't put this movie below A View to a Kill for a lot of the reasons that I talked about on A View to Kill, because I feel like that movie's kind of for some of the other reasons. And this movie, I think, is better and it's classier.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying I agree with you. I'm not going to go to bed and not lose sleep over it.
Won't lose sleep over it.
Sweet dreams.
GoldenEye still number 1. Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, License to Kill, The Spy Who Loved Me, The Man with the Golden Gun, Dr. No, Hello, The World Is Not Enough, A View to a Kill, For Your Eyes Only, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Thunderball, Tomorrow Never Dies, Octopussy, The Living Daylights, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, Diamonds Are Forever, and You Only Live Twice. I feel good about it.
It's a fair ending. And let's end this by talking about the
best part of the movie.
The best part of this movie. The best part of all of these movies. The man behind the boat chase, Desmond Llewelyn, who I mispronounced his name in the very first episode of second episode of this podcast. My bad. Second episode of this podcast. Desmond Llewelyn. Llewyn or something. I don't know. I don't remember what I said. I said something and you were like, that's not how you say his name. It's Desmond Llewelyn. Get it right. Desmond Llewelyn, who we are, of course, toasting to this movie because this is his last film. Now pay attention.
Now pay attention, 007.
The film suggests that Desmond Llewelyn would retire after this film, which in the canon he does, but that wasn't actually the case. In the interviews leading up to the film's release, he had stated that he'd return if the producers wanted him, and I fucking quote, or if God wants me. That's what he said. Is that not creepy?
I'm there until the producers don't want me, and the Almighty does.
The producers that he's there until he doesn't want to do it anymore. That's what they say.
Yeah, well, I'm there until God wants me.
How old was he though when he passed?
He was 85 years old when he passed away.
That's,
so,
I mean, that's
I can only surmise.
Life.
Now, granted, I only surmise that Desmond Llewelyn had kept asking the producers, like, I should have an assistant. I should have an assistant in these movies. And they were like, okay, well, let's cast somebody, a famous British actor, John Cleese, Barbara Broccoli, and Mikey G. Whiz were like, this is our backdoor if something happens to Desmond.
Nickname.
Mikey G. Whiz. This is our backdoor if
Gee Whiz. Yeah. every time something doesn't make sense in one of these movies, Mikey G. Whiz.
I'm only guessing that they were like, okay, well, let's put that in there because Desmond is getting kind of old, not realizing that it was kind of a blessing in disguise that they did do that. So only 3 weeks after the film was released. So Llewelyn did see the movie. Desmond would die from a car crash, head-on car crash that he was heading to like a book signing.
Actor Desmond Llewelyn, best known for a recurring role in James Bond films, was killed in a head-on car crash in England today. Llewelyn was driving alone on his way home from a book signing.
The other person in the other car also was like, the other person in the other car didn't die, but they were also like severely injured.
Dang. He didn't die of old age? He died in a car accident?
Yes.
What?
You didn't know that?
What? No.
Yeah, he passed away in a car crash.
Oh my God. What?
And it's
God
it's
wanted
like,
him.
It doesn't get any weirder to the fact that like the last time you ever see him, because I had to as I was watching the movie, I'm like, I thought he's in the end of the movie. He's not in the end of the movie.
No.
At the end of the movie, if you remember, it's just John Cleese.
You're not retiring anytime soon. Are you?
Now pay attention, 007. I've always tried to teach you two things. First, never let them see you bleed.
And the second?
Always have an escape plan.
I think the advice that he gives Bond at the end there, that's something I've told people in the past that they didn't know that it came from this movie. But I think in dealing with people in general, and maybe I say this as a generally introverted person, but when you are dealing with people day to day, whether it's, professionally or otherwise, like, have you ever been in a social situation and people go, they're telling the whole room that they're uncomfortable, and you go, hey, you're letting people see you bleed. Never let people see you bleed. It's a metaphor. It doesn't mean, you get shot and you let them see you bleed. Don't let people see you bitch and moan and complain and be anything
Your
less
weaknesses.
than stoic, and then have a way of getting out of that situation. It's a call to controlling your emotion so that your emotions do not control you, which is something that Bond actually grapples with in this movie because of Elektra, which is the polar opposite advice you get out of stupid fucking Frozen, which is let your emotions out in an uncontrollable way that's damaging to everybody around you, but fuck everybody else. Let it go. That you're at a party and you want to be like, I'm anxious, I'm nervous. It's like, no. You're letting people see you bleed. You're uncomfortable in your job. You're uncomfortable in whatever situation. Don't show it, and then have that escape plan. It's such a beautiful exit. I mean, I kind of get a little teary-eyed every time Q does his little lowering out of frame. It's beautiful. It's
You'd
perfect.
think they knew he was like gonna die soon.
It's as if they knew he had cancer or something. That's why I always assumed that he had something, but that the fact that he died.
It's very eerie that it's weird because it happened the way it happened, and like you remember, like M passed away like in the middle of these movies, and they didn't have that same backup of having a replacement necessarily like they did, and they kind of did this like half-assed thing that sort of works for the movie, whatever. It's just so by sheer luck that they were like, oh yeah, we cast John Cleese as his replacement.
Even the way that it's edited, though, like, okay, you said that Llewelyn saw the film. They cut it in a way that almost as if that he had already passed, right? Like he died after they shot it, but then when they were cutting it together,
and it's not how it happened.
But the way they handle that moment is it's kind of a soft moment. It's put together in a way as if it's a send off, as if it's saying goodbye.
Yeah,
and so it's so eerie that's not the way it actually was. That they had no clue that he was gonna go. Like
It's crazy too. Like there's arguments to be made about who's the best Bond, who's the best Blofeld, who's the best M or whatever, but I don't think there's any arguments against Desmond Llewellyn's Q being the best.
He lasted through every single Bond. Like he was in at least one film or another up until Brosnan. He was with every single Bond. Out of 5 out of the 6 Bonds, he shared a movie with.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? Like Moneypenny didn't do that, M didn't do that, but Q did. Q was with every single Bond. He probably only had like 2 days on each of these movies. Like he probably did not spend a lot of days on each of these films, but he was in so many of these movies over so many years, over so many different decades. He wasn't in Dr. No. It was a different actor who played the same character essentially. And then he couldn't be in Live and Let Die because of a scheduling conflict because he was working on something else at the time. But he was in 17 of the 19 Bond films that there was to that point.
That's crazy.
So it's seen everything transpire from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and into the 90s, almost to the millennium. This one is to Desmond Llewelyn, who played Q.
Q.
To Q.
To Q. Nanz, can you stand by your man?
Stand by your Nanz.
Bored.
Stand by your Nanz.
I think it says I'm
I wonder what
recording.
Q drank, according to the new movies. He drinks. Anyway.
Why are you the way you are?
Oh, pipe down.